everybody. Welcome back to Crime Weekly. I'm Stephanie Harlow.
And I'm Derek Levasseur.
Today we are diving in to part 2 of the John O'Keefe, Karen Reed case. And dude, this case is crazy. I can't do it. Like, I am so... There was many points where I'm researching and writing where I was like, I don't even know where to put this. Like, there's so much here. There's so much to talk about. This is crazy. Every single time I turn around, something else is unraveling. So I'm very excited to get your take on some of the things we're going to discuss today, especially the red Solo cups. And those who know about this case will understand what I mean.
That's so funny. Someone DM'd me and said, wait, they started mentioning red Solo cups, and I responded to them. And this person's going to be in our comments now, but they were like, oh, wait. And they mentioned some names too. Yeah.
So, and I saw a lot of people in the comments saying like, oh, wait till, we get Derek's take on all these butt dials. And we're going to talk about that soon. Trust me.
I think that same person DM'd me because they mentioned all of that.
Mm-hmm. So this case is going to take us places. Okay. And even I'm still kind of going back and forth. So I can't wait to kind of get your take on everything. But before we dive in, what do you have to say to us?
Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving.
Congratulations to Shannon, our editor, and her boyfriend, Sam, who recently got engaged. They're a great couple. Shannon's imperative to us on Crime Weekly. Mm-hmm. And she has her own character in Criminal Coffee. We love her. She's been with us for a while. Mm-hmm. And Sam, we hang out with him at CrimeCon.
Some people say we look alike, say we're like brothers.
Nobody says that, Derek.
Literally everyone says we look alike. The last 2 times Sam and I have taken photos and posted it, everyone's like, you could be brothers.
Shannon, side by side of Derek and Sam, please.
You're oblivious to life. Like that was like the biggest conversation at CrimeCon this year.
I am oblivious. It's true. I have no idea what's happening in the world. I just sit at my desk and research true crime cases night and day. So
yes. So
that's where I'm at. But yes, congratulations to them. Great couple. We love them both. We're very happy for them. So are you ready to dive in today?
Yes, I am.
All right. So the trial of Karen Reed would begin, as all trials do, with opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense. Now, opening statements are used to outline the key facts and the narrative that each side is going to present to the jury throughout the trial. It's basically a general overview of the case, the parties involved, the evidence that will be presented. Also, you kind of want to make sure, as an attorney, whether you're the prosecution's attorney or the defense attorney, that you kind of catch the jury's attention with these opening statements and closing statements. It is your one of 2 chances throughout this entire trial to address the jury directly. You want to make an impact. With that being said, and with that in mind, I wanted to start the episode with a quick summary of each side's opening statement. That way, as we go through this episode and the next ones, as we go through the timeline and the evidence, we can keep this in mind. What is the prosecution trying to prove? And the prosecution is the one that has the burden of proof, right? So they kind of have a little bit more pressure. And what is the defense trying to prove, or at least how is the defense trying to put forth reasonable doubt? Now, for the prosecution's opening statement, the assistant district attorney, Adam Lally, he outlined that the state's belief that Karen Reed and John O'Keefe's relationship was deteriorating. John wanted out, and so basically Karen purposely and intentionally hit him with her car that night. Lally outlines certain pieces of evidence that he believes will support this theory.
Some testimony from Trooper Joseph Hall. He's in a specialized unit within the state police called HARS for short, but essentially a collision analysis and reconstruction section within the Massachusetts State Police. His examination of the vehicle, his examination of the scene, his examination of specifically some Toyota texture, because Lexus is essentially owned by Toyota or vice versa. So there is some data that he's able to recover from that and back the vehicle up based on its known locations and travel, and key cycles, and essentially he'll opine that around 12:45 in the morning, when the vehicle was in front of the residence on Fairview, that for some perceptible period of time, that vehicle travels over 60 feet in reverse at over approximately 24.2 miles per hour. We'll hear testimony, as I said, from a number of different troopers, as well as from a number of different analysts from different labs. Included within that is Ms. Maureen Hartnett, who collected items from the vehicle, the defendant's vehicle, including the taillight, sort of housing from that vehicle, pieces of the taillight that were discovered in sort of the front grass and front street area. There is a specialized team called CERT team. You'll hear from Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara, who has a supervisory role in relation to that. And then later on that day of the 29th, he, along with Lieutenant Tully and a number of different members from his CERT team, were searching for evidence within the mounds of snow in front of that house, as the blizzard is still ongoing at this point through sort of the afternoon hours. Among the items that they locate is a sneaker. When Mr. O'Keefe is transported to the hospital, he's found to only have one sneaker on his feet. They find the other sneaker in that area of the body. They find various pieces of taillight. And as is wont to do, over the course of the following days, the temperatures rise, there's a rainstorm that comes in, and the snow melts. And over those successive days, there are additional pieces of taillights that are eventually discovered in that area of the front lawn in the street. Ms. Hardins also locates a cocktail glass that's located on the bumper or the rear area of that scene, and she locates a human hair on the back of that defendant's vehicle as well. Now, the cocktail glass on the bumper, you'll also see surveillance video from the waterfall, and Mr. O'Keefe is observed on that surveillance video essentially walking out of the waterfall with a cocktail glass in his right hand. Same right hand that has minor injuries to it, and the same right hand that's attached to his right arm that has the abrasions and lacerations that are observed by the paramedics, that are observed by the doctors at Good Samaritan, and are observed by the medical examiner as well.
All right, so it was a fine opening statement, kind of dry, boring, one might even say. I would. Lally didn't bring a lot of energy to it. He didn't try to really weave a story or paint a picture for the jury necessarily, which I do believe that the best attorneys will do that during opening statements. Once again, you got to catch these people's attention, all right? They're not used to reading police reports. These are lay people. They're not in law enforcement. They're not in the judicial system. They want you to present the facts in a relatable way. They don't want you to kind of just lay them out like this. He kind of laid out the facts the way one might do in a police report, which then made the defense's opening statement stand out even more than it would normally have. And I have to just kind of cut in here and say that Karen Reed, what she did do was hire an extremely good legal team. And one of those attorneys is David Yannetti. He came in hot, and he made sure he had the full attention of the jury from his first words. So what I'm going to play you, this is how he starts his opening statement.
Karen Reed was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did. You will learn that it was no accident that John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road in Canton on January 29th of 2022. You will learn that at that address lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. Because the Alberts were involved, and because they had close connections to the investigators in this case, Karen Reed was framed for a murder she did not commit. From a very early juncture in this case, you will question the Commonwealth's theory of the case. You will question the quality of the Commonwealth's evidence. You will question the veracity of the Commonwealth's witnesses. And you will question their shoddy and biased investigation, a faulty investigation that led to Karen Reed sitting here today. You will learn, in short, that the police did no real investigation of this case, and you will question why. You will question why the investigators had such tunnel vision. You will question why they focused solely on Karen Reed, someone with no ties to the Canton Police Department, as opposed to the well-known and well-connected Albert family of Canton, a family that was never treated as suspects by the investigators in this case. Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found mortally injured on Brian Albert's front lawn. His body was in full view and almost right below Brian Albert's bedroom window on his front lawn. He was found wearing only one sneaker. You'll learn that Brian Albert was a Boston police officer as well, and that he was a trained first responder. Brian Albert was notified that another police officer was injured and unresponsive on his front lawn, and Brian Albert did nothing. His sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, and other civilians were on his property that morning after John O'Keefe's body was found. Police, EMTs, firefighters, police cruisers, an ambulance, fire truck, lights flashing, and first responder Brian Albert never came out of his house. Equally important for you will be the fact that the lead homicide investigators never went inside the Albert home that morning. You'll learn that Brian Albert's brother, Kevin Albert, is a Canton police officer. It was obvious very early on that the Canton police should not be investigating the death of a man found on the property of the brother of a Canton police officer. So it was decided just about from the start that the Massachusetts State Police should take complete control of this investigation because the Canton police were conflicted out. Now, that sounded good at the time, but you'll learn that two major problems arose. First, despite the fact that they obviously had a conflict of interest, the evidence will show that the Canton police still had their hands in this investigation. You will find it astounding, but Canton police officer Kevin Albert, the reason for the conflict of interest in the first place, was continually updated about the status of this investigation while it was going on. Second, and equally troubling, is that the lead state police detective who was assigned to this case was a man named Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor, you will learn, is one of the many people in Canton with deep ties to the Albert family. Michael Proctor's own mother refers to the Alberts as the Proctor's second family. His own sister's wedding, Michael Proctor was in the wedding party with Colin Albert. And he sat at the head table of that wedding with members of the Albert family. That's the man who was chosen to lead the investigation into the suspicious death on the property of Brian Albert. That's the man who gave updates to Canton police officer Kevin Albert, while the state police were supposed to be investigating what had occurred at his brother Brian Albert's house. You'll learn that right from the jump, Michael Proctor predetermined the outcome of this case. Never stepped foot inside the Albert home on January 29th, 2022. Never checked out whether there were any signs of struggle inside that home. He never called for crime scene technicians and other specialists to look for blood or other trace evidence within the home. He never asked Brian Albert for permission to go in the home and take a look around. Michael Proctor never applied for a search warrant to go in that home. Instead, he focused immediately and exclusively on Karen Reed, the outsider. You will learn that no one in the Proctor family has ever called the Reed family their second family. No one in the Proctor family had been in a wedding party with anyone from the Reed family. Karen Reed was a convenient outsider. She was most definitely not from Canton. So how did Michael Proctor feel about her? How did he treat somebody he was investigating at a point in time when he should have been keeping an open mind and focusing on obtaining all possible evidence so that he didn't miss anything? Well, you will learn that on the very day that John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, Michael Proctor was texting with his high school buddies about this supposedly secret investigation, using his personal cell phone. He was revealing information about this investigation to his friends, assuming that nobody would ever find out what he was doing and what he was saying. And he was revealing his true thoughts about Karen Reed to his friends, not what he put in his sanitized police reports, his true feelings. to his friends whom he trusted, and in text messages that he never thought would come into the hands of the defense in this case. Lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, right from the start, called Karen Reed names you would reserve only for your worst enemies. He told his friends that he hoped that she would kill herself. He told his friends that he had seized her cell phone. And you will learn that he knew he shouldn't have been accessing any content on her cell phone because he knew there would likely be attorney-client communications on between Karen and me at that time. He knew that he was supposed to wait for a search warrant or other permission from a judge in order to go through that phone. But you'll learn that he went through the phone anyway, without permission. And you'll know that he did because he told his high school buddies that he was searching her phone for nude photos of Karen Reed. And he was disappointed he hadn't found any yet. That is the professional and unbiased investigator who was chosen to lead the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe. You will learn that one of Michael Proctor's high school friends commented to him that with a dead body on the front lawn, the homeowner in this case is surely going to catch a lot of grief. And do you know what Michael Proctor's response to that was? One word. Nope. And he explained why. Michael Proctor assured his buddies that the homeowner would not catch a lot of grief because, quote, the homeowner's a Boston cop too, end quote. That one sentence, ladies and gentlemen, in Michael Proctor's own words, will explain a lot to you about how this investigation was conducted. You will be able to evaluate whether Trooper Michael Proctor treated Brian Albert and his family differently because of who they are and their relationships between his family and theirs. You will evaluate whether this investigation was on the up and up. You will decide, as a result, how valuable or worthless the prosecution's DNA evidence is or is not, in light of who controlled that evidence. You will learn that Michael Proctor's fingerprints are figuratively all over this case. His fingerprints are all over the Commonwealth's evidence.
Okay, a lot there. A lot there. And to not be redundant and repeat everything he just said, let's just try to summarize. Michael Proctor, at minimum, to start with, major issues.
You don't even know the half of it, man.
Major issues to start with, and this attorney is going to make a fool out of him. I can see where this is going. I won't weigh in too much about Brian Albert and Kevin Albert. I will say this to back up the defense attorney. You said his first name's David, correct?
David Yannetti, yes.
Valid point. Like, you find this person on a front lawn of a property, you should be speaking to every single person there, and out of an abundance of caution, even if you like the guy that lives inside, you should say, hey, listen, we're going to do a search warrant. We're going to dot our I's, cross our T's, because I don't want this to become a thing later. Because there's a world, I don't know any of the story yet, guys, but if they had done that, they can go in there and document nothing out of the ordinary was observed. And I've told you guys before, as detectives, it's not only about finding the inculpatory evidence, it's also about excluding any potential exculpatory evidence. So going in there and saying, yes, there was nothing in there that suggested he couldn't or could be involved.
So do you think a full, forensics thing should have been done at the house? Like, it should have been considered part of the crime scene, get a warrant,
he was found on the property?
Yes, in the yard.
Yeah, then yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
right? Obviously.
Absolutely. I mean, he's found on the lawn. I wanted to speak to everyone in that house. We had a case a long time ago we covered on Crime Weekly News, and I don't remember the specifics, so I apologize. But it was like 3 people found frozen outside. Remember, it was like a tailgate thing?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Did we cover it on Crime? I know I covered it on mine, but
I didn't go deep on it. I think it was
were,
just Crime Weekly News.
Yeah, they were watching a game or something, and then the homeowner went to sleep. And then his 3 friends were found frozen outside.
And what did they do in that case?
they went in the house.
They searched the house, right? Because that's where they were last seen. Now, I don't know if you're going to tell me that John was in that house during that evening or whatever.
Well, that's what the defense and the prosecution cannot seem to agree on.
Oh, okay. So I'm on the right path. So regardless, he's found on the property and, he's got some law enforcement ties. Is it fair to say potentially he was at that home? Did Brian Albert know John O'Keefe?
Yeah, so remember that they had been at the bar the night before.
That's right.
Brian Albert, they weren't like friends, but they knew each other, and it was like an open invitation. Everybody come back to the house. Karen and John were going to come back to the house. Now the people in the house say that they saw Karen's SUV pull up, but John and Karen never came inside, and then they saw the SUV pull away.
Either way, that's something you learn. That's something you learn down the road. I would have gone to them and say, hey, we're going to interview everybody who's here. We're going to do a search of the house. Can I get consent or do I have to get a search warrant? We're doing this. I would say this to him. We're doing this to protect you.
So nobody can say we didn't.
Because the fact that they didn't, that's why the defense attorney's bringing it up, because we'll never know now. Was there signs of struggle? Were there any visible injuries or anything that would suggest some type of altercation took place in the house? The fact that Brian didn't come out when everyone else was around, as a former police officer myself, I was always looking out my window. If something went down in front of my house.
He knew what was happening because
he just chose not to come out.
Told, because Jennifer McCabe was there, and we're going to get into it. She's letting him know. Jennifer McCabe goes in the house. She tells him what's going on. He still doesn't come out. That's weird, right?
So I think the opening argument from the defense, David Yannetti, I'll just say David, did a great job. He paints a very clear picture of what he's going to put out there. I'm interested to see how he connects the dots and basically ties Brian Albert or someone in that home to John O'Keefe's murder, but I'm looking forward to it. I want to hear more.
I think more importantly in this scenario, right? Because once again, the defense doesn't have to prove that Karen is innocent.
Reasonable doubt. Exactly.
They have to put up reasonable doubt.
Something else could be possible.
Showing that an investigation was botched since day one can present that reasonable doubt. And showing that Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, was tight, like considered the Alberts his second family, was very close with them. And then not only that, is texting his friends and saying, no, the homeowner's not going to come under fire because he's a Boston police officer.
Yeah, no, that's not good for him. Not good for him, because now, as he said here, and it's a brilliant move, but it's a lot of defense attorneys do it. They know that the prosecution's going to put out maybe some incriminating evidence against Karen. And what they're saying is, hey, guess what, guys? Here's your glasses that I want every jury member to wear. And this glasses is the Michael Proctor is bias glasses. So throw those on and you can watch and look at everything they're presenting to you. But now you're looking through my filter that I've provided for you, which is from the start, Michael Proctor already made up his decision.
Yeah, you can't trust anything that this dude found, said, nothing.
Because as he said, figuratively, his fingers are all over everything. So, everything that Brian is involved in, now you have to question. So whether that's true or
everything
not,
that Michael.
I'm sorry, yes, I apologize. Everything that Michael's involved in, you have to question, which here's the reality. Without knowing more, and you're going to get into more, you've already kind of alluded to it, Michael could have said these things and still conducted a proper investigation. Again, guys, I don't know. But because these things were said, you're shit out of luck now. It doesn't matter what you did because everything is going to be tarnished. So,
I mean, the Michael Proctor situation is going to
get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it's awful. Awful. This person will never get out for he's done in law enforcement, okay? I
would venture to say, without even knowing this case, just based on those comments, is he even a cop anymore?
The last time I checked, he still was.
Okay. Well, we can look it up as we go.
And you're going to see that as he's being...
Because he violated a couple policies right there with the phone.
And saying he's looking for naked pictures of her. He said he hopes she killed herself. No, I do not believe somebody who's going into this, not looking at the homeowner at all, not searching the home, and immediately assuming that he knows what happened, and then saying he hopes the person who did it kills herself. And that's not all he said about her. We're going to get into it. He said horrible things. You cannot run an unbiased investigation. You can't.
So friends with a potential person of interest hates another person of interest. just in that brief conversation, that opening statement. So point one goes to the defense as far as opening statements. That's my final takeaway as far as that's concerned.
Yes, very much so. We're going to take our first break. We'll be right back. So let's talk about sleep and how important it is to not only your physical health, but your mental health. And I know that most of us in our busy society and culture aren't getting enough sleep. And sometimes we even feel guilty for getting enough sleep, but you need to get enough sleep. And that's why we highly suggest you get yourself a Helix sleep mattress. For the longest time, I was always tossing and turning at night. And now that I have my Helix Midnight Luxe sleep mattress, and I've had it for about 5 years now, I have gotten the best sleep of my life. I love that Helix is going to personalize your mattress to your body type, to your sleep preferences. Helix is going to give you a really quick quiz. You're going to answer these questions. They're going to suggest the mattress that's right for you, and then it's going to show up at your door really easily. It's in a box. You open the box, let it in, kind of inflate, and then you're ready to sleep on it. It is that easy. And I know Derek has the same mattress, and he also enjoys it.
Yeah, had it for years. I've said it on a bunch of times on this show. I struggled to sleep as well. So need to have my melatonin or a Beam, and I definitely need to have a good mattress. And Helix checks that box without a doubt. So you guys should check it out. And right now is the perfect time to do so because they have some great deals going on. You can get 25% off site-wide plus 2 Dream pillows with any mattress purchase, or you can get a free bedding bundle, which includes 2 Dream pillows, a sheet set, and a mattress protector, and that's with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. So if you want to check it out, now's the time to do it to get the great deals going on. Head on over to helixsleep.com/crimeweekly. That's helixsleep.com/crimeweekly. Check them out. Helix, better sleep starts now.
Okay, we're back. So what happened outside the Albert home in the early morning hours of January 29th, 2022? We are going to have an episode where we very, very intricately break down the timeline. And this timeline that we want to focus on is really short, like a 15 to 20 minute timeline, but we are not going to do that right now. Basically, where we're going to start off from is Karen and John are invited to go back to the Alberts' home along with a bunch of other people. And although that invitation to go to 34 Fairview for that after party had been extended to them, it had kind of been just like blanketly said. So Karen said that they got to 34 Fairview and she wanted John to go in first and just kind of like make sure it was okay that they were there. You know, she kind of felt a little self-conscious about it. So John gets out of the car. She said she watched him walk away, but she did not see him enter the house. She waited a few minutes. He didn't return. Karen says she texted and called a few times. John did not answer those texts or calls. And according to the records, around 12:55 a.m., Karen texted John, quote, "I'm going home," end quote, followed by another text also at 12:55 a.m. that said, quote, "See you later," end quote. At 1:02 a.m., Karen texted, quote, "Your kids are fucking alone," end quote. And then 2 minutes later, Karen texted, quote, "I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone," end quote. Now, she's not texting these things while she's sitting outside the Alberts' home. According to GPS and phone records, she was back at John's house, John O'Keefe's house, by around 12:45. So in reality, Karen did not go back to the Mansfield house. She was kind of just trying to make him think she was.
Yeah. So he would respond.
Or come home. She said she went back to John's house. She fell asleep on the couch. She did not leave his niece and nephew alone. And actually, the nephew, Patrick, hadn't even been at the house since 8 p.m. the previous night. He was at a friend's house sleeping over. However, Karen did leave several voicemails for John that morning. She called him 53 times between 12:30 a.m. and 6:03 a.m. Now, they did play these voicemails during a trial, but we know how audio gets distorted in the courtroom, especially when they're playing phone calls or like video stuff. It's all echoey. I'm going to play you a little clip in a minute of the voicemails just so you can get an idea of her tone, of her level of anger, whatever. But the voicemails have been transcribed, so I'm going to tell you what they say. At 12:37 a.m., Karen left John a voicemail saying, quote, "John, I fucking hate you." At 12:42 a.m., a voicemail was left where a beeping can be heard, as well as the sound of heels clicking on the floor. So it's believed that beeping came from John O'Keefe's garage door being opened as Karen arrived at his home, and then you can hear her shoes walking through the garage and into his house. Yeah. At 1:02 a.m., another voicemail is left, but it's described as room tone. Basically, you can't hear anything. At 1:11 a.m., Karen left a voicemail where she said, quote, "Yeah, it's 1 a.m. I'm with your fucking niece and nephew. You fucking pervert. You're a fucking pervert." End quote. At 1:18 a.m., Karen left another voicemail. Quote, "John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are fucking using me right now. You're fucking another girl." And then she says something that's unintelligible, and it says, "Sleeping next to me, you're a fucking loser, fuck yourself." End quote. So like I said, I want to be fair. I want to show everyone how Karen sounded, which was very angry while she was leaving these voicemails. We're going to play a short clip of them being played in court for that context.
"John, I'm here with your fucking kids. Nobody knows what the you want, pervert. Yeah, it's 1 a.m. I'm with your niece and nephew. You pervert. You're a pervert. John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are using me right now. You're another girl. Keep sleeping next to me. You're a loser. Yourself."
Okay, I want to talk about that clip, but I also want to ask, just because there's so many guys, I'm following along with you. So, and we're doing this live. I can't go back and pause it and rewind and hear what Stephanie said. So I apologize if you're like, "Oh, she already said that." Around what time approximately did they head over to the Alberts home or the walk across the street?
They all kind of left at different times, but on surveillance, and I actually have this information because I have notes
There we go.
for days. At 12:10 a.m., Karen Reed is seen leaving the Waterfall Bar and Grill on surveillance, and she's with 2 other women. And I believe these 2 other women is, at least one of them is Jen McCabe, I believe, but I'm not quite sure right now. But either way, she walks out around 12:10 a.m. And then a minute later, on that same security footage, we can see John O'Keefe leaving the same bar about a minute later. He's still holding a glass from the bar in his hand. And then they get together, he meets her at her car, and then they leave.
Okay, so just trying to get a window here, right, of how long this could have happened, because if we're to believe Karen, she goes over there and she didn't feel comfortable going inside, so John goes inside. So approximately, based on the times you're giving, around 12:30, she started making the calls. 53 calls, you said, by the way, right? 53?
Yes.
And we're going to get into that in a second, because we're going to call it how we see it the whole time. But 53 calls, starts around 12:30, so she potentially was sitting outside for approximately 20 minutes, waiting for him to come back out. It should have taken 2 minutes if he went in there.
So she would have, they believe that they arrived at the Fairview address around like 12:20, 12:21. Okay.
So that just, does that not, like, am I missing something here? Maybe people are screaming at me in the comments, but she started making the voicemails at 12:30. Right?
Yeah, so
and she was already back home by 12:37.
She was back home by like 12:42 when you can hear the garage door opening, back at John's house.
So 12:21 they got there.
So she probably made the call while she was driving.
Yeah, so 12:37 around the time she leaves. 12:40 is the time she gets to John's, who doesn't live far away.
12:42.
42. And so now you're looking at 12:21 they get there, and by 12:37, so 17 minutes.
Like I said, we're going to go over this very small window of a timeline in more detail later.
But this is coming from people who may not know this timeline. That's where I'm trying to represent them and say, listen, just on the surface, talking right now, 17 minutes to go from they appeared to be kind of lovey-dovey in the bar. We saw the video last episode. And then within a couple hours, they're leaving the bar separately, which is the first red flag. Why are they leaving separately? Maybe that's a common thing they do. I would expect them to leave together, but according to Karen, they meet back up and they get to the Fairview address around 12:20, and within 17 minutes, this is transpiring. So just listening to these clips and reading the text messages that were sent. We talked about it last episode.
And hearing the voicemails, like what she's saying.
The voicemails. I mean, listen, is it a good look? No. Calling 53 times, is that excessive? Absolutely. It's not a good look. There's a lot that can be taken from it. What I would say is we all go through shit. We all say things and do things in the heat of the moment. I guarantee you if we had cameras and we put your phone records and everything on the stand, and you'd probably have some things that you'd be embarrassed about too. So I'm not going to look too deep into it, but when we're talking about it in this context of would Karen be upset enough to want to kill John? It could be better for her if these weren't out there. We'll just say that. It's not a good...
Well, actually, here's the thing, because the defense, I mean, the prosecution is going to say that when Karen is calling and leaving these voicemails, John's already dead. She's already hit him. Okay. So I'm going to pull
them to create the alibi.
I'm going to pull a Derek, and I'm going to say, depending on what camp you're in, it can go either way. So some say that Karen was trying to create an alibi. She was trying to pretend she thought John was alive because she knew she had killed him. But others say, well, if she was going to pretend this in order to have an alibi, maybe she wouldn't have been so mean and aggressive, right? Maybe she wouldn't have been telling him she fucking hates him and calling him a pervert
just
and
like,
saying
hey,
he's
where
with
are
somebody.
You?
Yeah, like, I'm worried about you.
Yes.
You didn't come out. My stomach hurts. I went home. I'm with your niece.
Yeah.
I just want to that's maybe what she would have done if she was trying to create an alibi.
I kind of agree just hearing that firsthand. I mean, that's some great next level strategy when you're like, not only am I going to call to set up my alibi, but I'm going to make it look like I could potentially be involved in when they find him.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't seem like the smartest move, does it?
I'm going to seem like I really hated this dude.
Yeah, like I have motive to want to kill him.
I was irrationally, aggressively, and violently angry.
Right?
Right. It doesn't seem like the best
Doesn't
plan.
seem like the smartest option.
Additionally, a lot of people say what she was saying in the text, like, oh, I'm going home, your kids are going to be alone. It seemed like she was trying to trick John into coming home.
That's what I took away from it.
Yeah. Like, and all of his friends were like, yeah, John would never have wanted, his niece and nephew to be home alone for that long, like overnight, that late. So he would have come home if he had seen that.
That's what I took away from it, just from the outside looking in.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, once again, depending on what camp you're in, depending on where your bias already sways, you're going to maybe look at it differently.
But is it believed by both parties that he's already dead at this point, or no?
No, the prosecution's going to say that she already hit him with her car and he's in the snow dying. And the defense is going to say John went inside the house and did not come back out. And that's why Karen was mad, because she was like, what the hell? Like, you didn't come out.
And that's truly
and
what
that's where
happened.
Something happens to him in the house.
All right, I'm with you. I'm following you. This is a complicated case. And I do apologize for people who are like able to rewind it. I'm going to have questions like this because you have a lot of names, a lot of players, a lot of times, a lot of 53 calls. You have a lot to remember. So I'm writing as fast as I can.
Okay, so like I said, Karen tells John, I'm going back to Mansfield. I can't watch your niece. But in fact, she did not go back to Mansfield because she didn't want to leave Kaylee home alone. She said she fell asleep on his couch, still dressed. She woke up around 4:30 in the morning, and at that point, she realized John was still not home. The weather had become very bad. Remember, a blizzard was coming in. She was extremely worried. Now, at that point, Karen wanted to call Jennifer McCabe. Remember, Jennifer McCabe is the sister-in-law of Brian Albert's wife.
Right, and possibly one of the people she walked out of the bar with, potentially.
Yes. So she wants to call Jennifer McCabe. She doesn't have Jen's number. However, Karen knew that John's niece, who was asleep upstairs, did have Jen's number, so she went to wake her up. Now, Kaylee and Patrick would later tell the Norfolk Advocates for Children's Center in Foxborough that Karen spent most nights at their house and that she and their uncle had started arguing quite a bit. It was probably 3 to 4 times a week. Kaylee, the niece, said that a week prior to John's death, he and Karen had been arguing, and Kaylee was sitting on the stairs of the home, and she heard John tell Karen that the relationship had run its course and it wasn't healthy, but Karen didn't want the relationship to end, and she refused to leave the house. So on the night of January 28th, Kaylee said she'd gone to bed around 11 p.m., but she was woken up by Karen at around 4:30 a.m. She said that Karen was screaming, acting frantic, and wanted Kaylee to call Jen McCabe and put her on the phone so that Karen could talk to her. This call to Jen McCabe from Kaylee's phone happened at 4:53 a.m.
She was just screaming, Jen, Jen, Jen!
Fairly loudly, is that correct?
Extremely.
At some point, does the defendant get on the phone with you?
She does.
And what, if any, conversation do you have with her at that?
She proceeds to scream my name multiple times, and she tells me that John didn't come home, they got into a fight, and that she left him at the waterfall.
And how do you respond?
I had just woken up. I was confused. I didn't know what she was talking about. I was like, what are you talking about? And then she, told me that they had gotten into a fight and she left him there, and now where is he? And she was just kept screaming my name over and over. And so then I remembered that Chris Albert had still been at the bar. So I thought, well, maybe John walked home with Chris, because Chris lives close to the waterfall. I told her that I was going to call Julie and see if John had ended up with Chris.
You hang up with her, and then what did you do then?
I called Julie Albert.
As you were calling Julie, did you have any conversation with your husband, Matt, around that time?
Yes. He, had kind of shot up out of bed when Karen had called, when Kaylee had called, because Karen was screaming. And then he was, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm calling Julie because Karen, they got into a fight, and I was trying to explain it to him. And he said, what are you talking about? We saw them outside of your sister's house. And at that point, I hung up.
Yeah, another example where if you're, depending on what camp you're in, right, it seems like she's really laying it on thick if this is all for alibi. Seems a little excessive. And again, another example where, based on this depiction of her, she doesn't come off looking good. At all. Like waking up the niece, calling this woman in the middle of the night, screaming. It sounds like a genuine reaction.
Probably still intoxicated.
Probably still drunk. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
And I thought it was interesting because by the time I had watched the trial, and I watched all of the trial, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but by the time I'd watched the trial, I'd already gotten the timeline down, and I know that Jen McCabe testified or told the police that she saw Karen Reed's SUV outside of the Albert home. But then hours later, she's like, oh, let me see if John left with Chris when they left the waterfall. And it's like, how did you forget just like 3 hours later that you saw Karen's SUV at the Albert home? And your husband had to remind you that. And it was like 3 hours later, 4 hours later.
Possible everybody was drinking pretty heavily. I mean, alcohol is always a bad supplement when police officers or anybody's trying to get a statement out of someone, because your memory can escape you sometimes. But no, I mean, it sounds to me like Karen's in a real state of anger right now.
Everybody said that.
And I think that's good for her when we're considering what we're talking about, right? It shows that it's a genuine emotion, regardless of how it may look. It's not a great look for her, but there's a lot more at risk here than just looking bad and overreacting. So
absolutely. So she's completely frantic. She's screaming so loud in the background of the phone call that Matt McCabe is woken up just from her screaming in the phone, right? So,
wow.
Now, like I said, I do want to quickly shout out another YouTube channel, because after I watched this whole trial, I went to this other channel called Legal Bites because I wanted to get the perspective of a lawyer on some of the legal aspects. And now I officially love this woman. I highly suggest everybody check her out. She had the same impressions as I did when it came to the prosecution's presentation, as well as ADA Adam Lally just being incredibly boring. And multiple times throughout this trial, it really seemed like he didn't even want to be there. He did not want to be having anything to do with taking part in this trial. He was bored, and as a result, he was boring. And she also, Legal Bites came up with the same reference that I had when it came to some of Lally's word choices, which brought me back to the Depp Heard trial when Amber Heard's attorney kept saying things like, she kept saying over and over, what if anything did you hear? What if anything did you say? Etc. And Adam Lally does this so much, it drove me absolutely crazy. And I ended up resenting him, resenting every time he would speak because of this.
And instead, the prosecution, in my opinion, is putting on a lackluster case. And look, I don't mean to gang up on Assistant DA Adam Lally, but there's nothing in his overall presentation, vocally, body language-wise, that tells me that he believes in his case. During all of his direct examinations, he actually sounds kind of bored. He's prone to heavy sighs in the middle of a question that seem to suggest he doesn't actually want to be there.
Now, so you arrive there, you see Officer Sarafin and people from the fire department, correct? And you mentioned sort of a mechanical means of CPR. Is there a specific device that's used for that?
And in fact, I don't get the sense that he wakes up each morning of this trial with any passion or excitement, thinking today is another opportunity to seek justice for John O'Keefe, the victim in this case. And look, the jury might not notice this in the same way that my neurodivergent brain does, but he uses some version of what, if any, so often in his questions that it becomes an outright distraction. Sometimes it's what, if any, sometimes it's who, if any, or where, if any, or what, if anything.
What, if anything, did you note at that time or at any subsequent time in regard to footwear? What, if anything, happens with that? What, if anything, did you observe? What, if any, involvement did you have with that? What, if anything? What, if any? What, if anything?
And if you watched the Depp v. Heard trial in 2022, you're probably familiar with this phrase as a strategy to get around an objection that you're leading the witness on direct examination.
What, if anything, had been said about what Mr. Depp did the night before?
Objection to the extent it calls for hearsay, Your Honor. All right, be a hearsay objection. I'll sustain that objection.
I'm asking what, if anything?
That was still solicit hearsay.
To me, this use comes from a misunderstanding as to what it means to lead a witness, which is basically asking a question that already suggests the answer in it. And here, as was the case with attorney Elaine Bredehoft and Depp v. Heard, I just think that this is an advocacy crutch that ADA Adam Lally has developed over the years into a habit that's just part of his speaking pattern at this point. The problem is, it's personally driving me nuts already, to the extent that I've actually started keeping a tally as to how many times Adam Lally uses some version of what, if any, in his questions. On day 1, he used it 101 times. And on day 2, a half court day in which there was a lot of cross-examination by the defense, he said it 66 times. So we are up to a grand total of 167 what, if any's in this trial already at the end of day 2.
Yeah, so I felt the same thing. It says, like you watch these trials and they go on for weeks and weeks. I think this one was 6 or 7 weeks, and it's like 7 hours a day. And it's like, okay, there's not enough words being said as it is. We got to add some more in. And not only that, but the prosecution asked some of the most boring, pointless questions I've ever heard asked or brought up in a trial. And it made all of the testimony go on. And it made me feel like, because people do this and it drives me crazy, like you say 500 words when 5 would have sufficed. I think he's doing this because it's like he really doesn't have a lot to ask with these witnesses, and he's sort of just trying to extend it out for some reason. Like he'll ask, at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, how tall were the bar stools? Like how tall would you say the bar stools are? It's like ridiculous. Every single paramedic he asked, how do you go about getting an EMT license? It was absolutely insane. So I just it drove me crazy, and it feels like either he doesn't know what he's doing or he's purposely just trying to almost create confusion and boredom. I don't know why, but it's awful.
Here's what I'll say, and I'll say it really quick because she summed it up perfectly. As the prosecutor or as the defense, you're also a storyteller. And it's almost like you hear, I could, like for me personally, I can listen or watch Denzel Washington read a telephone book.
Me too.
But because of his talent and his ability to have some conviction in that story.
And emotion.
Where it's believable.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's intentional or not, but this guy is very monotone, and you're going to have a jury that's going to be bored and not enthused and not engaged with you, and therefore missing important facts that you may be trying to convey. And I know we talk about other attorneys that we don't necessarily like, but Jose Baez, but when he tells you something,
dude can spin a tale.
And when he says it, whether it's true or not, it comes off as if he believes it.
You're enraptured. Your attention's captured.
Even the opening statement, to go back to the opening statement, I believe David. I don't know if he's right.
Yeah.
But he believes what he's saying. And that's extremely important. If you want the jury to believe you, you have to believe it.
Now, what if any? Okay, what if any? now that I've said this, now that you've heard it, you will not be able to unhear it or stop hearing it. It is going to haunt your waking and sleeping hours until we're done covering this case, maybe even after. What, if any? Who, if any? Oh, my God.
Well, I also think this guy's like, what was the prosecutor's name again? Lally?
Yeah, ADA Adam Lally.
The other issue is that he's probably, maybe he's done some high profile cases, I don't know, but nothing more high profile than this. And he's put under a microscope. So something that, as she had mentioned, becomes just his common way of speaking wasn't being criticized by millions of people. Like when we do this podcast, there's things that I say and people in the comments will be like, take a drink every time Derek says it. I don't even realize I'm doing it, but it's become part of my speech pattern and you have to correct it. So I'm sure after the fact, he's heard these criticisms and probably was kicking himself in the ass.
I know. I hope he stops, but I don't think he can.
The next trial that's publicized, I guarantee you it will not be as prominent.
He would have to put 100% of his energy and attention into not saying that as many times as he said it. I think it's as natural to him as breathing, and oof. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. So the holiday season is upon us. I really love the holidays. Shopping for everyone on your list can be a little bit overwhelming. But when I saw that SKIMS launched their holiday shop, as they do every year, I kind of got excited. I finally started getting into the spirit because it is the best destination for all my gifts. And there's definitely a few pieces I have been eyeing. So everyone in my family is getting SKIMS for the holidays, and I'm going to have to buy some things first to try them on for myself to make sure that everyone else will like them. I have so many SKIMS pieces. It's hard to tell you what's my favorite. I have their underwear. I have their bras. I have their dresses. I have their pajamas. Right now, I am currently wearing a SKIMS bra. This is the Fits Everybody bra, and it is my favorite bralette ever. The SKIMS holiday shop has them packaged in the cutest boxes that make for easy stocking stuffers. We just highly suggest that everybody checks out SKIMS, not only for holiday shopping, but grab a few pieces for yourself. Treat yourself.
So shop SKIMS Holiday Shop at skims.com, available in styles for women, men, kids, and even pets. And if you haven't yet, be sure to let them know that we sent you. It's extremely important for us. Thank you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show and the drop-down menu that follows. We would greatly appreciate it. Check them out, skims.com.
We're back. So we're going back to Jen McCabe that morning. She called Julie Albert to see if she knew where John was. Julie didn't pick up. You know, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. Matt McCabe, Jen's husband, was like, no, Karen could not have left him at the waterfall because we saw them at your sister's house. The sister in this case being Nicole Albert. Now, once again, this is interesting because both Jen and Matt McCabe would tell police that they saw Karen's black Lexus SUV outside of the Albert home after everyone left the waterfall, but no one actually claimed that they saw John or Karen at the house, just that they saw the SUV. And we're going to get back to this, I promise. So John's niece Kaylee said that after calling Jen McCabe for Karen, Karen left the house and she told Kaylee to call Mike Camerano to come and pick her up. That morning, Karen also called one of John's friends, one of John's close friends since childhood. Her name is Carrie Roberts.
I answered the phone and she said, John's dead. Carrie. And then she hung up.
And when she's speaking to you and saying those words to you over the phone, how loudly is she saying those words?
Very loud. She woke my husband, who was sleeping. Then I got out of bed and Kurt said, what was that? I said, I don't know. Something's happening. I tried to call her, I think a couple times back to be like, what is going on? Finally, she called me back again and she said, I'm afraid John might be dead. He might have gotten hit by a plow. He did not come home last night. I was not supposed to stay in Canton last night and he would never leave Kaylee alone. I think something happened. Then she said she checked Kaylee's phone to see if John had called. And I said, okay, where are you now? And she said, I'm driving. Can I come to your house? Will you drive my car? I don't remember anything from last night. We drank so much, I don't remember anything. And I said, you need to go home and be with Kaylee if she's there by herself. I'll go look for him or something of that nature. Because I said, you're going to get a DUI. If you were drinking all night last night and you don't remember anything, you shouldn't be driving. Her voice was elevated. She was very frantic. She'd said, I'm going to come to your house. Will you drive my car? And I said, okay.
Okay, so here's our first acknowledgement that maybe something bad happened, and I'm sure without knowing the dynamic of this, people look at this two different ways. Some people see it as a start of an omission of knowing that something happened to John and maybe setting up an excuse like, I don't remember, but, she maybe gave too much here, saying he could have been hit by a plow. Others would say this proves that she really doesn't know. And the fact that, again, she's saying these things, which would look bad in hindsight, knowing if she knew what happened, why would she do all of this and make herself a suspect? So, I mean, you could take it, depending on on what camp you're in. Mm-hmm. The last time I'll say it for the entire episode. That is how you could interpret that. It's all open to interpretation.
Well, yes, it is. But there's going to be statements that Karen is attributed to making that also fall into question because they never showed up in any official reports. So we're going to get there. But so Karen calls Carrie. She's like, can I come to your house? And then you drive me to find John because I can't drive. Carrie's like, okay, but Karen never arrived to Carrie's house. Carrie believes she sat in her car and waited for about 10 minutes before calling Karen, at which time Karen told Carrie that she had actually driven to Jen McCabe's house. Now, Carrie had only met Jen one time previous to this, and she would testify that they weren't friends. They weren't close friends. They just kind of knew each other through John. I think it was one time.
Acquaintances.
Yeah, barely. So Carrie told Karen, okay, you stay there, stay where you're at. I'm going to drive over to Jen's. Then we can all get in the same car and go look for John. So Carrie's talking to Karen through her, phone, Bluetooth speaker thing in the car as she's driving to Jen's. And as she pulled into Jen's driveway, she was still on the phone with Karen, and she could hear the conversation that Jen and Karen were having as they sat in Karen's SUV. So Carrie pulls into the driveway. She pulls behind Karen's SUV. She's still on speakerphone with Karen.
Karen said that she remembered leaving him at Waterfall. And Jen said, no, I saw you pull up to my sister's house. And then at some point in the conversation, she said, what about my taillight? What about my taillight? And I looked, and there was a piece missing, but it was caked on with snow. You could tell there was a little black hole, but there was snow caked on it, and it was a blizzard at this point.
Or what you were just testifying about as far as the taillight. When is it that you're making those observations?
In Jen's driveway.
And so about how far away from the defendant's car are you the first time that you see or your attention is drawn to this taillight?
I was parked right behind them in the driveway.
And can you describe which part of the vehicle you're looking at as far as which taillight that you're observing this damage?
The right passenger.
So now we have some comments about Karen's back right taillight. So the passenger side taillight. This is going to be very important. And once again, we're going to talk about it in depth, right? Because you heard at the beginning of the episode when we were doing the opening statements, ADA Adam Lally says that they found pieces of Karen's taillight at the scene. They found microscopic pieces of Karen's taillight in John's clothing. They also found a hair on Karen's bumper and pieces of glass on Karen's bumper. From the cocktail glass that John was allegedly holding. Now, my question has always been, how did all of that stuff stay on the bumper as Karen's driving around, and then as the car's towed from Karen's parents' house to the Canton Police Department? You got a hair, pieces of glass, all of this stuff is staying on the bumper. And the fact of the matter is, they did not find those taillight pieces until after the initial evidence team had swept through and found, which we're going to talk about, pieces of the cocktail glass and also traces of blood in the snow. But they did not find any of these taillight pieces until later. And then they continued finding taillight pieces for days after, which is quite suspicious.
Only pushback, or not even pushback, but just alternative I'll give is maybe the snow being so compacted at that time may have encased some of those small microscopic elements within the snow. Because as she mentioned,
you wouldn't find any taillight pieces, not even one, even though they used a leaf blower to blow the snow around so they could get to the blood samples? You wouldn't find
you're
a
saying
single taillight piece?
No, I'm talking about the glass on her car, you're saying.
Oh.
I'm talking about the glass on her car where she described it as being the snow being kind of caked on. So with the snow and being sticky snow like we get up here in the Northeast, it could be really compacted. Sometimes you got to scrape it off pretty good. So if you're talking about small shards of glass, there could be a world where inside that snow was the glass fragments. As far as the taillight pieces, I'm with you. Yeah, that'd be difficult.
So let me ask you this then. Karen Reed hits John outside of the Albert home. That would mean the pieces of the glass were on her bumper. His hair was on her bumper, right? It has not started snowing heavily yet. And then she drives from the Albert home to John's home. That stuff wouldn't be caked in snow at that point because it wasn't snowing that heavily yet. So wouldn't that stuff have fallen off or blown off at some point during the drive?
You would think so. I've had times where evidence has stayed on a vehicle that you would expect not to be there. I've had a time where I put my coffee cup on top of my back of my truck and I drive down the road and then realize it and it's still sitting there and I don't know how that happened. Yeah. But I would assume the drive is very short from what I know from the waterfall to John's house, right? We're talking a short distance.
Well, they're going from the Albert's home to John's house.
Yeah, and the waterfall was somewhat near there, right? But
yeah, but either way.
So how far from John's house to the Albert's house to John's house?
I think it was like 7 minutes.
Okay,
8
7-minute drive, depending on the speed. It is in the back of the vehicle, so there's kind of like the air is going around the car. Listen, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just trying to pose another angle where, as unlikely as it may seem, they could have, quote unquote, got lucky without me knowing everything else, where the evidence was able to stay on the car. And then once it was parked, you did say that she parked the car in the driveway, in the garage, though, correct?
Yes.
So that no snow would have gotten on it then. So it would have happened when it went back out to the road and then snow maybe landed on top of it. I will say you wouldn't expect it.
No, you wouldn't.
If it's exactly the way it's been described, then law enforcement got lucky at best.
Yeah, I mean, especially because when you're towing the car to the police station later, you're going to put it on the back and there's things happening. The car's getting lifted.
Can I say one more thing that I'm thinking of? I want to make sure I hit it all. I have had a case where it was a hit and run, and there was fragments from the victim's vehicle found inside the broken taillight. We actually paint transfer inside the broken taillight. It was like a chip off the car. So I would like to know where the hair and the glass fragments were found, because if it was inside the housing of the light, more likely it wouldn't have fallen out. But we'll save that when we get there.
And I would say, from the defense's perspective, you might say it's already highly unlikely that these things would remain on the car. And now you add in the whole Michael Proctor aspect.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, the skepticism that I'm approaching it with because of what you've already told me. As a police officer, I'm still weary about what I say, knowing what you've already told me and knowing what I've heard in these clips. So yeah, if I'm doing that, of course the jury is.
Exactly. So Jen, Carrie, and Karen all drive back to John's house because Carrie said, maybe he is inside the house and you missed it. Maybe he's passed out somewhere, like he passed out behind the couch or on the floor somewhere. And did you check everywhere? Maybe you missed him. So Jen drove Karen's car with Karen in the passenger seat, and then Carrie followed them in her own car. They arrived to John O'Keefe's house, and then Karen once again pointed out her rear tail light to Jen and Carrie.
Karen did point it out at one point in the driveway. She said, "My taillight, look at my taillight." And I looked at it and I said, "You told me you don't remember anything from last night." She said, do you think I hit him? Do you think I hit him? And I said, "No, I don't think you hit him. I think you probably hit something, but let's just go in the house and look for him."
That sort of interaction that you had, or looking at the taillight, when did that happen?
I don't know if it was it obviously wasn't when we got there. It must have been when we were leaving to go out to look for him.
When you what? I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure if it was when we arrived or when we were leaving to go back out and look for him, but now that I've seen the video, it's obviously when we came back out of the house.
So Carrie is saying she didn't know when the taillight was pointed out to her, whether it was when they got there or when they were leaving to go look for John, but then they played surveillance video from John's Ring doorbell camera, and he also had a camera positioned over the garage, which showed the driveway, and she said, "Oh, I see now that it was when we were leaving."
That happens. I mean, this happened in 2022. When was the trial? was
this
last year?
Yeah, this year. Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, to expect her to remember every little detail, it's difficult for someone because you don't know how valuable that information is going to be 2 years later. So something as simple as not remembering when it was on the way in or out, totally understandable.
Yeah. So they go in, they look in the house, John's not there. When they realized he wasn't in the house, they decided to go out and look for John. So they all got into the car again in the same car. And during this drive, Carrie drove, Jen was in the passenger seat, and Karen was in the back seat. And both Jen and Carrie would testify that Karen was frantic, she was yelling and texting wildly. And on the drive over to the Alberts home, she made some interesting statements, allegedly and according to Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts.
Karen is in between us, like from the back, kind of pushing up in between Carrie and myself. And she's just screaming, "Carrie! Carrie!" Her name over and over, my name over and over. And repeating certain phrases. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Carrie is yelling at her to shut up, to sit back, to buckle up, to look for John.
And while this is going on, what, if anything, are you and Ms. Roberts doing in the front seat of the car?
She's slowly driving, and I'm just peering out the window looking for John. I mean, it was a crazy situation. She's screaming, he didn't come home. Could he be walking home? Where is he? So we're just looking out the window, looking for John.
What, if anything else, did you see her doing in the back seat while you were going from Meadows Ave to Fairview?
I didn't see her doing anything. She just continuously screamed that. And then as we got by different landmarks, she then started screaming, asking if John could be at certain people's houses.
Whose houses was she asking if John could be at?
If she could be at Bella's house.
Referring to the directions that you had provided the night before?
Correct.
Bella was a child who was around the age of Kaylee and your daughter, correct?
Yes.
And there have been some years in the past dating relationship between Mr. O'Keefe and Bella's mother, correct?
Yes.
So Ms. Reed is saying that in the car that morning as you're driving over to Fairview?
Yes, she asked, could he have been with Ashley? And I looked at her and said no, because to me that was a crazy idea. And then Carrie had mentioned, do you think he could have called somebody else that lived on a street over? And she started screaming, who's that? Who's she?
It's interesting because I was starting to say to myself, man, she keeps bringing up like this theory that maybe she hit him, and it's starting to become a little questionable that she's fixated on this one scenario, which seems very unlikely that you would accidentally hit someone and not realize it. But then at the end of the clip, she did say that multiple times now she was playing out other scenarios. Could he be with a girl? Could he be somewhere else? So that was more in line with what I would expect. I still think it's interesting that she even thought it was a potential that she had hit John accidentally, because allegedly
she said those things.
Okay,
right? Yeah.
According to these people that they're saying it. So just to take them at their word right now as we're discussing this in real time, for her to come to that conclusion, I don't know. I mean, I've been drunk before. I've never drove home drunk like that, but if I've had damage on my car, would I assume that I hit someone? I don't know. I'm trying to stay neutral and look at both sides with everything you've said, and it's hard to do. But I think the fact that she was running through different scenarios with these two people is good for her. And it's just more of the same where we can separate the two things we're talking about. Was Karen acting the way she should be in that moment? It seems like she wasn't. She was very erratic. But does that mean she's a killer? No, there's nothing here. In fact, I would suggest the opposite. Her acting like that and not even putting on a show is more indicative of her telling the truth and just being who she is.
You heard Jen McCabe mention somebody named Bella. Bella was a young teenager. John had dated Bella's mother, Ashley, in the past. And the night before, when John had called Jen McCabe for directions to the Alberts, she had mentioned Ashley's house as a landmark because Ashley lived nearby the Alberts. Now, I've always wondered if this started a fight in the car.
Yeah, that's why I made that noise. I was like, oh, yeah, That could start a fight, especially if drinks are involved.
Yeah, maybe Jen's on speakerphone and she's
Yep.
like, "Oh yeah, it's Ashley's house." And then
yeah.
and Karen's like, "Are you serious? Like we're going to a house right down the street from your ex-girlfriend? Like how often do
Or
you
why
go?"
is she bringing it up?
Why is she bringing it up? Yeah,
you know,
she's
like,
trying
why
to piss me off. Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially drinking. And now, especially starting to learn a little bit about Karen, right? She's an emotional person.
She's kind of jealous. She thinks something's going on. She already thinks.
I don't think anybody with a brain is going to sit here and tell me, based on what we do know for sure, just on the voicemails, the 53 calls, that Karen is a emotional person.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to fly off the handle over something like that comment, absolutely possible with what we know already.
And I think it drives you crazy a little bit, right? When you're in a relationship and you feel the person pulling away and you're like, the only reason you would be pulling away if there's someone else.
Yeah.
Is there someone else and they won't confirm, and you have the suspicion, women do have gut instincts about these things. And so it ups the ante. Like now you feel like you're going crazy. And then anything that you hear, it's like confirmation bias is just going to sort of go in the column of, oh, I knew there was somebody else. I knew there was something going on.
I also think their relationship, what you said with the episode 1 with Aruba, not knowing anything about them, you telling that story was important, especially now, because it gives us a little bit of insight into their relationship and how they treated each other in public. And in my opinion, John didn't treat her very well. And so that could also create some insecurity and some skepticism about his feelings toward her and what might be the reason why he's acting the way he does. Potentially, like you said, another woman.
I think that she definitely felt not appreciated. You can hear in the voicemail, she's like, "You're fucking using me." There was things that she felt she was providing for him as his partner that he took advantage of and didn't appreciate.
Used.
Yeah.
She didn't like it and she was vocal about it.
Now, did Jen actually tell John O'Keefe, "Oh, use Ashley's house as a landmark"? We don't know if this was actually said between John and Jen the night before. We only have Jen's word to go on. And it kind of does seem like in this testimony, she's attempting to make Karen Reed look like a crazy, jealous person, right? Like she was like, "Well, why would he be at Ashley's house?" I was like, "That's ridiculous." And it's like, come on. You started this a little bit, So there might be some sort of narrative that is being spun here in this testimony. So they're driving to the Alberts house. The three women turned onto Fairview from Chapman Street, and Jen McCabe said that at this time it's still quite dark, right? It's pretty early. It's still dark. It's, what month did this happen? Isn't it January? Yeah, so it's
January,
dark.
Beginning of January. Actually the end of January 29th.
Exactly. So it's getting dark at 4 p.m. It's not getting light until noon. We're headed to that part now of our lives, and it's snowing heavily, and the wind's blowing, creating poor visibility conditions. Remember, the wind chill, the wind levels were pretty high, which is also another reason why I'm like, how the hell did that stuff stay on Karen Reed's bumper with the wind whipping around? But anyways, I digress. We'll talk about that later. So Jen also said that just prior to arriving at 34 Fairview, which was the home of the Alberts, there was a cluster of trees and like a flagpole. And Karen immediately yelled out that she spotted John's body, which confused Jen and Carrie because they claimed that when she said this at that moment, they could not see anything.
We drive past the flagpole area, and all of a sudden Karen starts screaming, there he is, and she's banging to get out.
Banging on the door in the back seat?
Yes.
And at the time that she's saying this, were you able to see anything outside of the vehicle?
I saw nothing.
And what, if anything, when she's banging and kicking or banging on the door, what did Miss Roberts?
Miss Roberts unlocked the door. Karen got out. Miss Roberts looked at me and said something like, "She's crazy," or "She's batshit crazy," something like that.
Where is it that she goes?
She just runs.
And runs with?
Straight to John.
And again, when she's running, at this point in time, can you see what she's running toward or where she's going or anything that she's talking about to you?
I was on the passenger side, so as I got out, she was already at John.
And all of a sudden, Karen said, there he is. Let me the F out of this car. And she started kicking the door.
How hard was she kicking?
Pretty hard. I mean, she wanted to get out of the car, but it was locked because once you start driving, the back doors lock. So I looked over and I didn't see anything. And I looked at Jen and I said, she's crazy. And I unlocked the door and I sat back and watched. And she ran over to a mound of snow.
So at the time you're driving down the road, have you seen anything, as you're driving down, sort of looking at the side of the road, have you seen anything on your side of the vehicle?
No.
And when you say she gets out of the vehicle, is it your side or passenger side where Ms. McCabe is? That
The driver's side.
so she gets out of the driver's side of the vehicle and the back passenger, correct?
Correct.
And how quickly does she go sort of from your car to where she ends up?
She ran over to the mound.
And at that point in time, even when she runs over, could you see what she was running over to?
At some point, I realized it was the shape of a body.
So let's take a quick break, and then we will discuss this. I know that the holidays are coming up. I know we've talked about that a lot, but I do have the perfect gift for you when it comes to family members. And I know that it's the perfect gift because for the last 2 Christmases, I have gifted this to at least one person in my family, and they still rave about it to this day. The SkyLight Frame is literally the gift that keeps on giving every single day. And the SkyLight Frame is a touchscreen digital photo frame that your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. And the cool thing is if you gift these SkyLight Frames as gifts, you can pre-upload photos, and it's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. It's super easy to share photos. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free SkyLight mobile app or email. No account or subscription is required. And it looks beautiful in your home. The photos are displayed in HD resolution. You can choose from 5 different frame styles to match whatever decor you got going on, and you can set it up in portrait or landscape mode. So I highly suggest that you give, many people in your life the SkyLight Frame, or just keep one in your own home, because these pictures, when I walk by my SkyLight Frame, it makes my day because I can stop for a moment, pause, and just spend a few minutes looking at all the happy memories of my life flashing by. And I love that.
And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners and viewers, you can get $20 off your purchase of a SkyLight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/weekly. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/weekly. Once again, get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/weekly.
Allegedly, according to Jen and Carrie, Karen sees John's body as they're pulling up, but they could not see anything. It's dark, poor visibility. She seemed to know exactly where he was.
Okay, so I just want to ask you a question because you keep saying stuff that's making me wonder if we're not supposed to believe Jen and Carrie. Is there something more that's you're gonna surprise me with that would suggest they would have a reason to lie?
Well, yeah, I mean, the stories have changed multiple times from the time of the incident to the time of the grand jury to the time of the actual trial.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will go off because I'm here with you now in real time as we're going through it, that as I'm listening to this as a jury member, okay? And as a jury member at this point, when Jen is making these statements, it's not good for Karen. It's not good for Karen, just looking at it for what it is. They're both in the front seat. They have a clearer view. They're unable, both of them, to make out John's body, and yet immediately Karen knows it's John and where he is. Not even like, oh, there's something right there. It's like, no, there's John. And I don't think that's a stretch for anyone without knowing anything else, but just in this moment for people to put 2 and 2 together and say, oh, she knew that was John and that he was right there because she was already aware of that information prior to going out to this location with Carrie and Jen. That's what you would take away from it, or at least that's what's being presented in that way. Now, is that true or not? We're not there yet. A lot can be taken from it, but at minimum, it gives the impression that she knew John was there. But there's even a bigger question, and I think we're going to get into this as we go on. There is a world, something else I always say, where Karen did in fact know he was there, but it still doesn't mean she's a killer. And I'll save that for later, but that's a whole different conversation to have as far as it's not binary where she either intentionally killed him or wasn't there at all and this was some frame job. It could be something in the middle where could it have been an accident and she was unaware of the significance of what occurred. until much later. So there's a lot at play
Yes,
here.
but keep in mind the prosecution is charging her with murder.
No, from a judicial standpoint, you're right. She's being charged with first-degree murder, correct? So that's what you're looking for here. And this doesn't automatically say that, but it's not a good start. It's not a good look for Karen to be the first one to spot him. And the fact that she was with two other people could hurt her or it could help her, but some may view it as, oh, she brought these people with her to be witnesses to her, quote unquote, finding John, which other people have done in the past who were guilty of murder.
Yes, and we're going to talk about this later, but the prosecution is going to put forth their theory and their evidence that Karen earlier that morning had already driven to 34 Fairview, which is when she had confirmed basically that John's body was there and he was dead, and that's how she knew exactly where he was.
Interesting. And is that going to be that window where she said, I'm going to come to your house, and then she doesn't?
Yes, kind of, yeah.
Okay. I can see where they're going with it. I'll reserve judgment, but I can see it.
So Jennifer McCabe would later tell the police that when she saw John's body, he was covered with approximately 6 inches of snow and his phone was underneath his body on the ground. Jennifer said that Karen then yelled at her to Google, how long do you have to be left outside to die from hypothermia? And Jen does Google something. She Googled hose long to die in the cold. HOS, hose long to die in the cold. This is going to become very important later. So remember that. Because
I don't know how that could become important. I am looking forward to that.
Well, because that Google search was made for the first time at 2:27 a.m.
By who again?
Jen McCabe.
Ah, okay. Now I get it.
So I'm going to give you a little spoiler into that whole mess.
She grabbed my hands and she said, Google hypothermia, Google how long it takes to die in the cold. And so I had my phone out and it was cold and my hands were frozen and I have MS, and I took my phone out while she was screaming and shaking my arm, and I attempted to Google how long does it take to die in the cold.
That Google search was at 2:27 in the morning. That's when the Google search happened, and you'll find out why we know that.
Alan Jackson telling Court TV and the other media gaggle as he was leaving the courthouse there after her direct examination, saying that they have proof that this was done at 2:27. So we expect to hear about it tomorrow.
All right, so we are back from that clip.
Yeah. So what you were saying, or what you were alluding to, wasn't necessarily what was typed, but when it was typed.
Both, I guess, right? Because if the prosecution
shows a sense of urgency.
Well, if the defense is saying, no, Karen did not hit him and leave him to die in the cold. He went inside the house, somebody or more than one somebody's beat him up, and then they put him outside to die in the cold. Maybe somebody in the house at that time would be Googling, how long does it take to die if you're left in the cold?
Well, maybe I'm framing that wrong. So basically what I was saying is it's not the typo of hose. It's more when it was typed.
Oh, yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as
it's
who
just
typed
it's a typo, yeah.
But when you said hose, this is going to become a big part. I'm like, what the fuck? How could this tie into it? But you were hiding,
long to die.
Yeah, you were hiding the little Easter egg of, oh no, by the way, that typo was done at 2:27 a.m. That's the
Google search was made allegedly, and obviously the prosecution is going to bring in their witnesses who are going to be like, no, that's not what happened. She was using an already open web page. But the FBI, we're going to get into that. The FBI gets in on this case, which they don't typically do. And they're the ones that pull that extraction of her phone and say that the Google search was made at that time. So this Google search is going to be very important and a huge point of contention for the defense and prosecution.
Okay. I could see why it would. 2:27, not a good time window when you think about him last being seen around 12:30, so he could have been inside for a couple hours.
Prosecution is saying, no, Karen hit him at 12:45, but we've got Jen allegedly inside the house Googling at 2:27 a.m. Yep. How long does it take to die in the cold?
Yeah, we know she was at the party, so why would she be searching something like that?
Yes.
If that's what actually happened.
Yes, if that's what actually happened. All right. So Jennifer McCabe, Carrie Roberts, and Karen Reed, they find John's body outside of 34 Fairview at around 6 a.m. And at 6:04 a.m., Carrie Roberts places a call to 911. And in the background of this 911 call, you can hear Karen Reed. She's absolutely going ballistic. Now, Officers Saraf, Good, and Mulaney of the Canton Police Department were dispatched to the address along with the Canton Fire Department and EMS. Officer Steve Saraf was first on scene, and this is going to become a huge issue because that's not what the Canton Police Department dispatch log claimed. The dispatch log said that Officer Mulaney arrived first, Saraf arrived second, and Officer Good arrived third. And basically, the dispatch log makes it look like they all arrived within 7 seconds of each other, but that was the order. Mulaney first, Saraf second, Good third. Now, Saraf actually, in reality, got there at 6:10 a.m. Mulaney got there at 6:11, and Good didn't even get there until 6:16 a.m. Not only is the dispatch log in the wrong order, but the times are also completely wrong. During the trial, Officer Saraf was asked if everything else on the dispatch log was correct, and they present it to him, and he looks at it, and he's like, yep, it all looks great, at which time it was pointed out to him. And I don't know why these witnesses don't do a better job, because when the defense is cross-examining you, and the defense started Officer Saraf's cross-examination, and they were like, hey, is there anything you want to change from your statement yesterday? And he was like, nope. I said it. I mean it. Let's go.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me too. That's a pretty common tactic on narcotics where they try to get you nervous beforehand. I've had that.
Well, they're getting him nervous because they have something that they're about to follow it up with.
But what I'm saying is they're always going to say, no, I don't, because sometimes it's a bluff.
So he's like, is everything else on the dispatch log accurate? Saraf looks at it. He's like, yep, perfect. It's great. And then it's pointed out to him by the defense that the address on the log actually said 32 Fairview Road. And on top of that, Saraf had testified under oath in front of the grand jury that he'd responded to 35 Fairview Road. And in Officer Good's report, he also wrote that they had responded to 32 Fairview Road. Obviously, we know the correct address and the actual location that law enforcement responded to that morning was 34 Fairview Road. Now, the defense is going to suggest that this was an active attempt to mask Brian Albert's address, to not have it in any public documents. But Saraf said, no, these are all just mistakes. And the defense is like, okay, you testifying in front of the grand jury, the incorrect address was a mistake? He's like, yep. And he's like, y'all writing this wrong in every report, that's a mistake? He's like, yep, all mistakes. That's it. Which, given the fact that now we have all of these things piling up, is going to be harder to believe. Steve Saraf also testified that when he was on scene, Karen Reed made a statement to him. She said, quote, it's my fault. I hit him, end quote. However, in Saraf's incident report, he makes no mention of this statement. In the incident report, Officer Steve Saraf said that Karen Reed continued making the same statement over and over again. But that statement was, is he dead? Not, I hit him, it's my fault. The day after this, on January 30th, Saraf was interviewed by State Police Detective Michael Proctor, and once again, Saraf claimed that Karen Reed's statements at the scene were simply her continually stating, is he dead? He never says in his own report or to Michael Proctor, who's the lead investigator, that Karen said, it's my fault, I hit him. He actually never says that until he's testifying.
So in April of 2022, for the first time, you attributed the phrase, this is my fault, I can't believe this happened, to my client, correct?
That's correct.
But nowhere in your official report did you say that, correct?
That's correct.
And nowhere in your interview with Trooper Proctor the next day did you say that?
That's correct.
You think that was a pretty important omission on your part?
It was an oversight.
An oversight?
Yes, sir.
That a woman whom you made contact with, standing over the body of a fallen police officer, said to you, this is my fault. Just missed that one. Yes?
Yes, I missed it. Yeah, I didn't write it down.
Yeah, he's kind of flippant and dismissive here, which is not a good look. We always talk about perception and how you're coming off to a jury. I'll be the first to tell you I've definitely messed up dates and addresses, and sometimes it'll be come into question at court because my partner would write something different down and we have to just come out and say, yeah, I screwed up. I messed up. It wasn't accurate. It was, it was a different address or whatever. But as you mentioned before that clip, with everything else that we have and Proctor and all these different connections, it does raise a lot of eyebrows. And when you're painting a narrative that this involves a coordinated effort amongst police officers and you have a mishap like this, knowing who that address belongs to, I see where you're coming from.
But they're not questioning him about the mishap with the address at this point. They're questioning him about
the whole,
Karen Reed
exactly.
standing over the body of her dead boyfriend and saying, it's my fault I hit him. If something like that was said to you at the scene of a crime,
without a doubt it'd be in there.
Do you think
Be the
it would have
number one
made it
thing.
into your report?
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yes.
No doubt at all. It's self-incrimination. I mean, you're going to have that in there, obviously.
Hello. Exactly.
Yeah, no doubt.
The fact that it was not in his report and that he did not say it to Michael Proctor the next day, and it doesn't even come out until he's sitting in front of a jury.
Yeah, no, it's a problem.
That's an issue.
Yeah, it's a problem. And it kind of, at this point, do you even believe it? Because it's just so late in the game. You can't.
No. And I'm sorry, at this point, when you're sitting there and you're questioned with this and you're asked, oh, how did this happen? And he shrugs and he's like, it's an oversight. That's a big ass oversight, my friend.
It's a confession.
Hello.
So the one thing you omitted from your report is
arguably the most important thing.
Not even arguably, the most important thing. So that's where I was going with that book. I know you're passionate about this part, but yes, that's what I was going to say. The address, I can see the omission of this statement, if it did happen, is unacceptable. And I have never seen something like that in my personal experience or through one of the guys that I was supervised or was writing the reports and I would review it. I don't think that's something you would miss.
Does not look good, man. Does not look good. Okay, going back to the initial law enforcement response to John O'Keefe's body, Steve Seraph recalled pulling up to the address. He said that as he approached the address, he saw 3 females waving at him from the front yard. He said that if you were looking at the house from the street, the 3 women were in the left corner of the property near a flagpole and a fire hydrant. He said that John O'Keefe was on the ground. Steve Seraph said he had a light dusting of snow on his chest and that 2 women were performing CPR on him. Now, the prosecution would tell the jury that it was around 12:30 a.m. when John O'Keefe's body ended up where it was found, and the defense claimed that he would have ended up there a few hours later after he'd gone inside the house for a period of time. So for Steve Seraph to say there was only a light dusting of snow on John's body, that might have suggested that he had been in that position for a shorter time, since the snow had started around like 10:30, pushing to 11. But as these blizzards start, they start pretty lightly. They pick up speed throughout the night. So if he only had a light dusting of snow on him, then that would kind of support the defense's claim of he hadn't been laying there in the yard for
the
that long.
entire time. Yeah.
But Jen McCabe says he had 6 inches of snow on him. So once again,
it's a big difference. Dusting versus 6 inches.
Oh, yeah. And although Steve Seraph said he observed that John was not moving or breathing and he was cold to the touch, he went to his patrol vehicle to retrieve his AED device, which is a defibrillator. Now, I also want to mention that it is shown on Seraph and Good's dash cam footage that Jennifer McCabe at some point, after they showed up, she entered the Alberts' house. During the trial, Officer Seraph is questioned about this. He's asked by the defense why a crime scene should be secured and why witnesses should be kept separate. And Seraph said, well, that's so they can't collaborate and get their stories straight. And so the defense was like, yeah, so why would you allow Jennifer McCabe to walk away from a dead body in a yard and enter the house to make contact with the other individuals? Do you think that was appropriate? And Seraph was like, probably not. Probably not. And he's like, but nobody stopped her. You guys allowed her to do that. So now she can go in the Albert house and be like, guys, not saying that this is what happened, but if you're the defense team, you're going to put forward a theory.
It opens up this scenario. It makes it possible.
As she went in and she's like, okay, guys, John's dead. Like, the police are there. We're going to say Karen said this. We're going to stick to this story.
Yeah, Brian, you stay in the house.
Dude never does come out, does he?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Interesting.
Nope. The fact that at minimum, this police incompetence creates opportunities like this for the defense. Now, I'm not even saying it's an opportunity. It could be exactly what happened. But just by not doing your job appropriately and not treating every investigation as if it's a serious crime, in hindsight can come back and really bite you in the ass.
Yeah,
make you look like an idiot.
And it's going to, in court, even if you have a guilty person, have an opportunity that person walks because you didn't do your job properly.
100%. That's the best way to say it. We're not saying Karen's guilty, but that has happened in other cases where there's police misconduct, and because of their incompetence or their ineptness, it leads to a not guilty verdict, rightfully so, because the police didn't do their job. If you don't do your job, the defense will exploit that.
But also, let's be honest. These guys are veterans of the police department. They've been in there 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
Oh, do I got stories for you?
But they all know better. The fact that...
I'm going to be honest with you. No, they all don't. I can tell you, you struck a nerve there. I had some veterans on my job, morons. Absolute
are they morons or are they lazy?
Well, they're a combination. I mean, they're showing up, their shirts are hanging out. They should not even be on the job anymore. And it's just maybe they didn't start off that way, but I don't want them anywhere near me because they're idiots. And that, I can promise you, every police officer who watches the show, you're lying to yourself if you say you don't have that guy on your job where you're like...
One guy maybe.
Yeah.
But everybody...
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Everybody, or is it more likely that because this was Brian Albert's house, they handled things differently than they normally would?
It's also possible, yeah. Absolutely.
And let me ask you another question, because I know you don't live in Massachusetts, but you're familiar with law enforcement there. We've got Michael Proctor. We haven't talked about too much, but he's going to be the lead investigator.
Yeah, he's with MSP. Yep.
He's a Massachusetts State Police detective. That's a pretty coveted position.
Mass State Police is well, before the Karen Reed thing, I mean, they were very highly regarded. One of the best state police departments in the country.
Probably have to know your shit to be on there, right?
State police in general is supposed to be the cream of the crop in every state, including Rhode Island. You know, they're the best of the best.
So arguably, you probably wouldn't say that Michael Proctor or any Massachusetts State Police detective would be one of those people that just was an idiot and didn't know their shit. Because how would you get that position?
No, you gotta earn your stripes. Yeah,
you do. All right. So now Canton Fire and the EMS arrive. They take over resuscitative efforts on John. Lead paramedic Anthony Flammati would testify about John's injury. He said that John had a low body temperature that would put him in the extreme hypothermia range. He said John did not appear to be dressed for the weather, right? John had cuts to his right arm. He had a distended abdomen that didn't appear to have external signs of trauma. Flammati also mentioned that John's pupils were dilated about 4 millimeters. They were non-reactive, and there was dried blood in several places on his body. Flammati said he tried to get some info from Karen so that he could figure out how to treat John. Basically like, hey, do you know what happened here? That way he knew what kind of efforts to put in. And he said the only response he got from her was the repeated statement of, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. However, on cross-examination, Alan Jackson, one of Karen's defense attorneys, once again called into question how much we can trust Flammati's testimony, since he had not included Karen making this statement in his initial report. This is starting to become a pattern. Not only did he not include this in his initial report, but when he transferred John to the care of the hospital staff, he didn't tell them either. Which, you know, if Karen is saying, I hit him, you'd think that Flammati would follow this up with some clarifying questions. Like, you hit him how? You hit him with a car? You got in an argument last night? You hit him with your fist?
You hit him
how
with a brick?
Did you hit him?
Yeah, like,
how do
we treat him?
He does not ask those follow-up questions. He does not put her statements in his report. And when he brings John to the hospital, you know, since he claims he was asking these questions of Karen so that he could figure out how to treat John's wounds, he doesn't say anything to the hospital staff either, allegedly.
Yeah, like, hey, he was potentially hit by a car.
Yes.
Something worth noting.
Something worth noting. Now, during his testimony, Flammati said that he did tell them, but that documentation for EMTs ends at transfer of patient care. According to his memory, he did remember relaying that information to the doctors and nurses. But we're going to see in his cross-examination, maybe that's not so true.
Testified at the grand jury that you wanted, once you got to the hospital, you wanted to be as quote-unquote helpful as possible when you handed over the patient, correct?
Correct.
You said you actually stayed at Good Samaritan for an additional 10 to 20 minutes, which is your habit in cases like this, because you wanted to be quote-unquote an asset to the medical intervention team, correct?
Correct.
That team includes the doctors and nurses that were trying to provide life-saving services to Mr. O'Keefe.
Correct.
But you never relayed to a single doctor or a single nurse a single word about a woman who said, I hit him, did you?
So documentation for us ends at transfer of patient care. As far as my memory, I do remember relaying that information to the doctors and nurses.
You do?
Yes.
Have you ever testified about that, ever, previous to this?
Never been asked about that.
Oh, nobody ever asked you, so you didn't tell anybody.
In the court setting, no.
Testified in front of a grand jury, didn't you?
Yes.
Mr. Lally asked you a bunch of questions.
Yes.
During the course of that conversation that was under oath, did you ever disclose that you told the doctors and the nurses that you heard a woman say, "I hit him"?
I recall telling the doctors and nurses that there's a question of that the patient was hit by a vehicle or we don't know, is what I directly said to the doctors and nurses.
You directly told the doctors and nurses that there was a question about whether or not he was hit by a vehicle, right?
Yes.
Have you ever said that in any context, either to the police or in a grand jury before today?
I don't recall.
You were asked a bunch of questions yesterday, the day before yesterday, and this morning by Mr. Lally.
Yes.
Did you say it on your direct examination?
I wasn't asked that question.
So since Mr. Lally didn't ask you, you just left it out, that you told the doctors, the medical professionals, that in fact you described that this patient was likely hit by a car.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You wrote a report as well, correct?
Yes.
We talked a little bit about that report. There's an area in the report for a narrative.
Yes.
About your observations, your experiences with this patient, correct?
Correct.
Your job as a lead paramedic is to be as detailed as possible, correct?
Correct.
You want to provide and impart the most detail you possibly can about an incident to assist in medical intervention, correct?
Correct.
Take a look at page 3 of 5 of your report.
Yes.
You see that narrative area?
I do.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that my client said the words, "I hit him"?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to your report, the portion of your report, where you indicate that you told the doctors and nurses that she said, "I hit him"?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that your concern for the patient was that he had been hit by a car?
It doesn't say that.
You indicated on direct examination that you were, quote unquote, looking for anything that we could pass on to the emergency room that would assist.
Yes.
I think it might have been an assistance to the emergency room personnel to indicate that you believe this person had been hit by a car.
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe that that would have been an important piece of information to pass on to the emergency room assistants?
Objection.
I'll let him have that.
It would have been important, yes.
And it's nowhere in your reports, correct?
It's not in the reports, no.
You didn't tell that to the police when you were interviewed 8 days later.
I was not asked about how or what I was.
My question is,
Yes.
Did you tell the police 8 days later, or 9 days later when you were interviewed? And you didn't tell the grand jury that, correct?
No.
And you didn't mention that on direct examination in front of these jurors, did you?
You know, you're not going to like it, but I mean, listen, to me, being in that position, I feel like there's a real strong possibility this guy could be telling the truth, but the defense is focusing on a specific angle. So we write a report, and our reports as police officers are for court purposes a lot of the times. EMTs, my brother's a firefighter, their reports are after the fact where they're writing those reports. And normally those reports are internal reports that are there to document what you did on that call. And so if he's saying in one breath, I told the doctors and nurses when I got there, but also saying I didn't write it in the report, they're two different things. The lawyer asked him at one point, would you think that information would be important for the people at the hospital who are assisting him? He should have said, yeah, that's why I told him. But instead he just answered the question directly and said, no, it's not in the narrative. My assumption is that narrative is the internal report that's written on their computers in the back of the bus or the back of the rescue truck, you would call it, right? That's what my observation of that was. And it's also possible he's lying, right? That's where we're going with it. But I think there's a world that the defense attorney was driving home the fact that he had never mentioned it before. And in that vein, it is a problem because that is something that you should bring up. If you know somebody's going to be questioning you, even if it's direct, when you're getting briefed at the beginning, that might be something that was worth mentioning to Lally. Like, hey, you may want to ask me about this because this is something that I heard. And I would also say, I'm wondering if the doctors or nurses were interviewed or put on the stand at this trial, because you could easily find out who was working that night, and that EMT would be able to go back and say, these are the people that I told, to see if he's lying or not.
Okay, so he doesn't write it in the narrative section of the report. Okay. He doesn't tell it to lead investigator Michael Proctor when he's interviewed a week later. So this is a different thing now. This is not your report anymore. Now you're being interviewed as a potential witness. Don't you think that would have come up then?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It should have came up, but this guy also seems like a dumbass, if I'm being honest.
No, I think he seems like he's in the spotlight and he doesn't want to say anything that's going to catch him up. I think that's what he seems like to me. He's being very careful. And then you testify in front of the grand jury. You do not bring it up. He says, well, I wasn't asked. How the hell could you be asked about it when you didn't tell anybody about it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he's got to be briefed on it. But I mean, it's one of those, I see what the defense is doing here. I'm just going to keep it 100%. It's the angle you're going with, that, this is something, but I would push back and say if Michael Proctor's in on all of it, that would be the time where Michael Proctor would give a wink and a nod and say, you heard her say I hit him, right? And so that kind of contradicts the whole theory of this is like an inside thing. They're all in on it. I truthfully am listening to that statement, and the defense is right. The way they're pushing back on him, everything they're saying.
Well, no, because by that time, nobody had really, it wasn't in anybody's report.
Well, that's
so this
what I'm
could have
saying.
been a narrative that was created later that then everybody who was involved was asked to
on board.
sort of fall
Yeah.
in line with.
I'm acknowledging that, but I'm also giving the other side where it's, like I just said, the question I would have for you and everybody else, this guy is now saying, I told people at the hospital that she said I hit him with a car. Very easily. Now, in hindsight, they can't do this right now because they're in the middle of a trial. But I would think at that point, prosecutors would have went to the hospital and said, who was working that night and who did you tell? Because that's critical. Now, if you have doctors and nurses corroborating your statement, that makes it more compelling.
Maybe the prosecutors did do that, and there was nobody to corroborate their statement.
I can tell you who didn't do it.
The defense?
You got it.
Yeah. But I mean, why would they, right?
No,
Once again, the burden of proof is not on them.
But I'm not a lawyer. I'm just I'm looking for the truth.
So I actually am glad you said that, because the prosecution could have easily done that to support his statement. So that they either didn't, which why the hell wouldn't you? Or B, they could find nobody to corroborate his statement, and they were just hoping that it didn't get brought up.
Yeah. Or I don't know. I don't even know how it works. Could they bring it in after with the discovery already being presented? Could they go back and add witnesses? I don't know.
I don't know. I guess he should have brought it up during the grand jury or sometime before.
I mean, I keep saying it. At minimum, it's just a stupidity.
I still feel like, as the prosecution, even if this wasn't an issue, you still would have wanted to question the medical staff that were on a shift when John came in, right?
Yeah. And what did the MMT say? Usually they give you a brief verbal synopsis. Hey, listen, just brought one in. Then, the doctors in the emergency room, they're not looking at a report. They're going, what happened? What do we have? And, that's the EMT's job to relay that information.
All right.
So clearly he didn't do that.
Another paramedic on the scene, Matthew Kelly, he admitted he had not heard Karen utter the statement, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, while on the scene. Even though he and the other paramedics were all working on John, they were close together at the scene, he just heard her asking, like, is John dead? John's dead. What's going on? She was frantic. Let's take our last break. We'll be right back. It's the most wonderful time of the year, holidays on the house at DraftKings Casino. With this season's offerings, you'll unwrap everything on your list: exclusive games, huge jackpots, and exciting rewards.
DraftKings is offering a warm welcome to new players with $100 instantly in casino credits with just a $10 wager. Plus, everyone can get in on the action with a holiday reward every week. So sign up with code CRIMEWEEKLY because the holiday cheer is here, only on DraftKings Casino.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. 21 plus. Physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. New customers only. Opt-in required. Casino credits are non-withdrawable and expire in 168 hours. Terms at casino.draftkings.com/promos. So now we have Canton firefighter, EMT Katie McLaughlin, and she would later be interviewed by Massachusetts State Troopers Proctor and Buchanek. And she said that she had seen trauma to John's face and eye area, as well as vomit in his mouth. She also claimed that when she asked Karen Reed if Karen knew how John had gotten injured, Karen looked at her friends and said, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Now, this claim and testimony would later be called into question due to Katie McLaughlin's relationship with Caitlin Albert, the daughter of Brian Albert, whose home John was found dead in front of.
Ms. McLaughlin, who's Caitlin Albert?
I went to high school with somebody named Caitlin Albert.
Somebody named Caitlin Albert.
I went to high school with somebody named Caitlin Albert.
So do you know Caitlin Albert?
I do.
You're friends with Caitlin Albert?
I would say more acquaintances, not close friends.
How do you describe an acquaintance?
I would say that we have mutual friends, so we might see each other occasionally because of mutual friends, but we don't have a one-on-one friendship or hang out regularly.
Who's her dad?
I don't know.
Any objections? Do you know who her family is?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach her?
Yes.
Since Katie McLaughlin testified on Thursday and Friday, we received a deluge of photographs that put her with Caitlin Albert on many different occasions after they graduated high school. We received information from their high school yearbook that they were more than just acquaintances in high school. They were teammates on the track team. And even after I sent that email with the photographs that I attached to it, late last night we received another photo where Katie McLaughlin and Caitlin Albert are standing next to each other in a photo at a baby shower in June of 2021, about 8 months before John O'Keefe's death. It's very clear to us that Katie McLaughlin perjured herself. And I wanted to discuss the issue of the admissibility of not only the photographs that we're now providing that we just received over the weekend, but I also want to resurrect the admissibility of H, I, J, and K for identification. And I think a discussion of this, Your Honor, needs to start with what court orders are currently in place. The leading case with regard to the provision of reciprocal discovery when the defense is offering...
Oh, so you want to get back to Rule 14, the Rule 14 issue?
It is a Rule 14 issue.
Okay.
That's supplemented by...
Hold on one second. So on top of that, we can discuss this later. I'd like to get the trial started.
That's fine, Your Honor. We just, my belief, my strong belief, is that we need to determine this today. And the reason is that Caitlin Albert is coming up as a witness for the Commonwealth. She faces the same areas of cross-examination that Katie McLaughlin faced, and these photos are relevant to her cross-examination.
Okay.
So, first of all, this judge, Beverly Canone, I've got issues with her too, because she sustains objections from the prosecution that she really shouldn't. Like when Katie McLaughlin was asked, do you know who Caitlin Albert's family is? And the prosecution's like, objection. And the judge is like, sustained. Why? You asked her a valid question. I wanted to hear the answer to that. But Katie claimed she didn't know who Caitlin's family was. This is a lie. They went to high school together. They were on the track team together. 8 months before John O'Keefe died, they're at a baby shower together. And even from the beginning of Katie McLaughlin's testimony, when he's like, who's Caitlin Albert? And she's like, I went to school with a Caitlin Albert. Like, girl, you know exactly what's happening. You know what he's asking you. Why are you being so elusive? Y'all are looking so suspicious that if you're not guilty of anything, you're certainly doing a good job of making it seem like you are.
Yeah, I would have just owned it. I don't know why she didn't just own it.
Well, because she doesn't.
The small community.
Because she doesn't want to show that there is an actual conflict of interest.
To your point, by trying to pretend like I know a Katie Albert, that's a problem. That you should have just came right out and said it. Yeah, I know who that is. And then that's more believable.
So here's another thing that I just found out this morning, actually. And once again, this is my research and what I'm figuring out. It's constantly evolving. So apparently that night, the night before at the Albert's house, Brian's son, Brian Albert Jr., was celebrating his 23rd birthday. And there was a bunch of his friends there. And one of the girls who was in the house that night was the daughter of the fire chief. Now, I don't know which girl it is. I've got to look more into it. And I have to even make sure it's true because this is just what I found out this morning. But Katie McLaughlin was an EMT with the Canton Fire Department. The daughter of the fire chief is inside the house. This is all a very tight-knit sort of group of people.
Yeah, for sure. You can see it. They're all interconnected.
Yes. So that's concerning. Now, once again, not only does Katie say that she heard Karen make this statement, she claims that it happened in front of a police officer. But that statement, I hit him, that all these people are claiming Karen made that night or that morning, that statement doesn't appear in any reports, not even in the police reports. And according to Katie McLaughlin, Karen made the statement in front of a police officer.
What do I always say to you? What's our motto?
Wait, which motto?
Police motto. If it's not in the report, it didn't happen.
Oh.
I never said that to you before?
No, but you have, but damn. That the fact that you would just kind of say that is you saying Karen Reed never made that statement.
No, what I'm saying is if it's not in the report, it didn't happen.
It's not in any reports, Derek.
That's the problem. And I told my guys that all the time. I don't care what you saw. If it's not in the report, it didn't happen according to the courts. So you got to make sure you document it. And it's also on the supervisors, but that didn't happen. If it was said, it's not in the reports. And therefore you have this type of situation at trial where the defense is eating your lunch.
So Karen's over here, standing outside the Albert home, standing over the body of John, telling everybody and their damn mother, I hit him. All these people hear it.
What do we have, like 6 people so far?
Yeah, like 6 people. And none of them find it important enough to place in a report?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, some of them are not even professionals. We're talking friends as well. Jen and Kelly. They heard it as well. Didn't they say that she said I hit him as well to them?
Yeah.
So
but I mean, they also are
friends.
relaying this to police officers. Jen McCabe told the police officer.
Oh, no, I'm saying it should be in the report. I'm just saying now we're up to like 4 or 5 people that heard this, right?
Yeah. Well, if you're including Jen and Carrie, then we've got.
Carrie, not Kelly. I'm sorry. You're right.
We got Katie McLaughlin. We got the one EMT who clearly was trying not to perjure himself on the stand. Forget his name. We've got the police officer. We've got, that's
Jen and Carrie.
Jen and Carrie, yeah.
Yeah, so like 5.
It's crazy. So it's not going to appear in any reports. This claim only makes its appearance later throughout the investigation, grand jury, and then the trial, like sporadically. So John's body was located about 30 feet from the Alberts' home. He was wearing the same clothing he'd been wearing when he was seen on surveillance video earlier that night at the bars. The autopsy was performed on January 31st by Dr. Irene Scorti-Bello of the ME's office, and she ruled his cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head and hypothermia. John arrived at the hospital with his body temperature in the low 80s, and his pancreas was dark red in color, indicating that hypothermia was a contributing factor to his death. But The blunt force trauma had occurred before hypothermia set in. There was a laceration to the back of John's head, approximately 2 inches in length, along with multiple skull fractures that had resulted in brain bleeds. Dr. Scordi-Bello also observed that John had 2 swollen black eyes, a small cut about his right eye, a cut to the left side of his nose, and several abrasions on his right forearm. John O'Keefe would be pronounced dead at Good Samaritan Hospital at 7:59 a.m. And when Troopers Proctor and Buchanan viewed his body at the hospital, they both observed 6 bloodied lacerations of varying lengths on his right arm. They noted in their reports that these cuts extended from his forearm to his bicep. Now, the prosecution is going to say that these cuts were from the glass that John was holding, and they cut his arm when he got hit. The defense is going to say these cuts were made when he was attacked by a German Shepherd inside the house. Good old Chloe. Troopers Proctor and Buchanan also noted in their reports that both of John's eyes were swollen shut and blue in color, and they both made a note in their reports that John's boxer shorts, which were in a pile of other clothes on the floor, were saturated with blood and vomit. Now, this is weird. Saturated with blood and vomit. In my opinion, if he got hit by a car, he's going to fly up in the air, he's going to fall down, right? And he's going to be knocked out, and this is why he's unconscious, and then the hypothermia sets in. How is he vomiting to the point where it's ending up as boxer shorts? That sounds like something that would happen if you were standing upright and vomiting, not if you were laying down and vomiting.
Yeah. Could he have tried to get up, maybe stood up for a couple minutes, threw up, and then lay back down? I agree with you. It seems like the physics would take hold there and it would just be out the side of his mouth on the sidewalk. But the injuries itself, it just seems like pretty significant for someone who was hit by a car in reverse, but they could have been hit and then flew to, like you said, hit something else. They could have hit a wall or whatever. I don't know what's in that immediate area. What he could have.
Nothing really. There's a flagpole, but he wasn't close enough. No, he wasn't close enough. No.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of injuries.
And there was only one shoe present with John's other clothes, black Nike sneakers. So the EMTs.
No other shoe was never found?
They did find it several days later.
Where was it?
They found it by where his body was found.
Okay.
So the EMTs.
If you told me it was in Brian's house, then I'm leaving.
How would anybody know if it was Brian's house?
Nobody
searched Brian's house.
I'm just saying
could have been in Brian's house, and then it got thrown out later. You know, because it wasn't found during the first sweep.
But you're from you get more snow than me. It is possible.
We're going to talk about. They used a leaf blower to blow the snow away. They found shards of clear glass, but not red rear tail lights, pieces of plastic, some of them pretty large, by the way, not pieces of red plastic, not a black Nike shoe. Don't you think those things would stand out in the white snow more than clear glass from a cocktail glass?
Okay. So I know you're not trying to do this. You just can't help yourself. So you would clearly believe at this point, I mean, you just got to call it what it is. Like we're beating around the bush. You believe all of this was planted.
I don't know what to believe.
Okay.
I'm trying to find, I'm finding it hard to believe.
I'm just saying that's what you're inferring, that everything was planted there.
I'm not inferring anything. That's what the defense infers. I'm looking at how the evidence was discovered, and I'm trying to find a logical way of how you would find clear glass, but not red plastic from a taillight and not a shoe. A size 12 black Nike men's shoe. The
clear glass was found on the ground, not just on her bumper.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So state of his boxer shorts is weird. The cuts to his arm, also weird. That'll come into play later, so put a pin in that. At 9:08 a.m., Karen Reed's blood was drawn at the hospital, and her blood had a reading of 93 milligrams /DL. What does DL stand for?
No clue.
No clue. Okay, so Nicholas Roberts, a forensic toxologist from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, he performed both a serum conversion and a retrograde extrapolation on this reading, and he would testify that he believed that Karen Reed's BAC at that time that her blood was drawn was between 0.07 and 0.08%, which meant that around 12:45 that morning, her BAC would have been somewhere between 0.13 and 0.29%. So, pretty drunk, okay?
Smashed. Yep.
Absolutely. So when the EMTs removed John's body in order to put him in the ambulance and transport him to the hospital, His cell phone was under his body, and it was also reported that under his body, the grass could be seen. So this is another thing people point out, and they're like, oh, well.
He was there before the snow.
Or he was still warm when he laid down and the snow under his body melted. Yeah.
Okay. So that is a great, let's talk about that for a second, because that's this case and a lot of other cases. Think about what we just said, and it's important. I just said something, just that the first thing that came to my brain, which was, oh, grass underneath him. That means you move something that was there before the snow started, right? Commonsensical. But then you just said something where it's like, no, or it could be that he was so warm and he was still alive that he melted the snow below him. Both can be true. And depending on where you are in this case, that's the one you're going to go with. And I only say that because
this happens with multiple.
No matter what I say or what you say, there's an alternate angle, and it's going to explain how the narrative that one person believes in is not true and the one that they believe in is true. And that is the story of a lot of these cases.
What does this do in a trial? It's not about what's true.
It creates doubt, yeah. No, the defense is just trying to create doubt.
What story is the jury going to believe?
Yep. There's a ship going down this, this body of water. The defense's job is to poke holes in that ship. That's all they're supposed to do.
And to be fair, neither of those things could be true. It could be something else entirely.
Of course. But
these are the two stories that the jury's being presented with. Which one are they more likely to believe?
Well, it would align with theories, right? Like if it's the theory that he was there before the snow started, it gives more credence to the idea that maybe Karen accidentally did it or didn't do it at all. Now, if it's later, then it gives more credence to the fact that he was in the party for multiple hours. So that's what I'm saying. What we're giving two scenarios, but what we're really doing is supporting two theories.
Dude, especially if he had his cell phone. Like if he was alive, let's say she hit him and then they were going to say, oh, well, he was alive for like 2 more hours before he died. He had his cell phone. Why wouldn't he have gotten his cell phone and called somebody?
He was, I would think at that time, 12:37, we said 12:42, he's already in the condition that he's in.
Yes. So now the episode's getting long, but we got to talk about the red Solo cups before we go. So this is the last thing we're going to cover.
Okay. I need to know about the red Solo cups because
I need you to know.
I need to know because I can't keep pretending to not look it up. I got to know.
Okay. So after John's body was removed, Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, Sergeant Michael Lank, and Sergeant Sean Good of the Canton Police began searching for evidence in the snow in the immediate area around where John's body had been found. There they discovered a broken cocktail glass, and they also took samples from the snow where a red substance, which looked like blood, was found. And they always say it looked like blood. That's what they say, but it was blood, obviously. However, the way the blood samples were collected was unorthodox, to say the least, and would later obviously be called into question. Sergeant Michael Lank of the Canton Police would later testify about his methods in court, and I cannot wait to hear Derek's take on this one because he's been trying to be fair. I really literally don't know how you could be fair about this.
Well, you're not you're serving as a defense right now, but okay, let's play this clip. Hear what we have to say.
I stood by and observed while Lieutenant Gallagher used a leaf blower to try to clear the top layers of snow off of the scene. The purpose behind the leaf blower was to just take the top layers of snow off to reveal what was underneath and try to preserve any potential evidence. Ultimately, we were able to see what appeared to be blood drops in the snow, as well as a drinking glass, cocktail glass. Drinking glass was secured into an evidence bag, and the blood drops were secured into 6 Solo cups.
And why were they secured into 6 Solo cups?
We did the best that we could with the situation, with the weather and deteriorating situation. Lieutenant Gallagher was able to attain the Solo cups from Lieutenant Kelleher's house, which was diagonally across the street.
Once they were secured, just in reference to the Solo cups, beyond sort of just putting them into Solo cups, what, if anything else, did you or the other officers do to secure those items specifically?
They were secured into a brown evidence bag.
And following them being secured, where did they go from there?
They were then, they were then placed into my truck at that point, my police truck that I was using that day, and ultimately transported back to the police station
And transported back to the police station by
by me.
I do want to talk for a second, just a brief second, about setting up a crime scene outdoors. You indicated that the crime scene was relatively secure, was your word. It was relatively secure because there were patrol cars or cruisers sort of around the perimeter
Yes.
of the yard. Is that right?
That's correct.
The crime scene tape wasn't working because it was windy.
Crime scene tape was up, but it was being blown all over the place.
Okay. And of course, Canton PD has the ability to go get stakes and just hammer some stakes into the dirt if you wish to.
No.
You don't have stakes at Canton PD?
No, we-
You eat stakes. You eat STAKES.
I know what a stake is. No, we don't have any.
Canton PD doesn't have those.
No.
So if the crime scene tape was blowing down, that was just sort of a let's give up on it. Wasn't doing any good.
No.
In your mind, it was futile.
The crime scene tape was futile, yes.
Okay.
It was left up until we made the determination to take it down, but it wasn't really doing its job.
All right. And once the scene was cleared, all those cruisers that were protecting that crime scene were now gone, right?
Yes.
And all the cruisers were gone by about 7:50 in the morning, 7:50, 7:55.
Yes.
So before 8 a.m., that crime scene was completely open. I'm sorry, after 8 a.m., that crime scene was completely open.
Yes.
Unsecured
Yes.
and available to anybody who wanted access to it.
Correct.
Who literally physically leaned down and scooped that blood up?
Me.
And that was done in a plastic solo cup that we've heard a little bit about.
Yes. Yes.
You're aware that those solo cups are unsealed?
I believe Lieutenant Gallagher got them out of a sealed package.
When I say unsealed, I mean they don't have a lid on them. They're not airtight containers.
Correct.
So once you scoop up the snow and the dirt and the debris and the grass and everything else, along with the blood, they're just open to the air.
Yeah, there was snow and blood. There was no dirt and debris in the class that I can recall.
You're sure about that? There's no dirt and snow?
I didn't observe any, no.
You didn't observe any dirt and snow? You don't think there's dirt and snow?
I didn't observe any dirt in the glass. Excuse me, the cup.
Okay. Certainly wasn't the sterile cup.
No.
Certainly wasn't the crime scene cup.
No.
You're aware that the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab warns against collecting any biological material in anything made of plastic, correct? Are you aware of that?
No.
When you scooped up the blood, did you videotape that process so we know exactly which blood stain was scooped up from where?
I don't recall if it was videotaped, but we did not document which scoop went in which cup.
Okay. So if there was multiple contributors to blood, multiple contributors of the blood, we'd sort of have no idea which blood drop belonged to whom, correct?
Objection. Sustained.
Once these unsealed cups were in your possession, what did you do with them?
The cups were placed into the Toyota Tundra that I was driving that day and ultimately returned back to the police station.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about the process once you returned back to the station. They were put in a brown evidence bag, correct?
Yes.
And ultimately, when you log these items into the, tell me the name of it again, it's temporary evidence?
Temporary, excuse me, the blood was put in temporary evidence refrigerator.
Okay, inside the evidence bag. Cups are still inside the evidence bag and it's logged in.
I don't recall that. I'm not sure if I took them out or not. I don't recall.
You indicated that there's an item number or property number that's assigned to them.
Yes.
There's generated a seal or a label to go on the evidence that's being stored, correct?
It should, yes.
And the bag is sealed. The evidence bag is sealed like this red tape that we see on this thing, correct?
When possible, there are certain items that can't be bagged, and then sometimes you create a tag and attach it to a tag.
Right, but if it's a brown paper bag that's an evidence bag, you certainly just fold over the edge of it and just put a red evidence seal on it to make sure that that's secure and not tampered with, correct?
That would be one way to do it, yes. I don't recall if I left them in the bag or took them out of the bag. I don't recall.
If you left them in the bag, you likely would have, if you're booking them into evidence, you likely would have used some red crime scene, not crime scene tape, evidence tape.
If I had left them in the bag, I would have put the property label right on the bag.
So everybody could see it?
Yes.
Okay, it's an evidence bag with important evidence in it. Don't mess with it. It's secure, correct?
Yes.
Can we have tab 23? You see that white rag?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Did you see a bag sitting next to it?
I do.
Doesn't look like an evidence bag, does it?
No, it looks like a Stop and Shop bag.
Stop and
But
Shop.
actually, it looks like an evidence bag. It just doesn't say Canton Police on it. It says Stop and Shop, but it does look like an evidence bag. It's the same thing.
That's a grocery bag.
It is. And that's exactly what our evidence bags look like, so that's what I thought it was at first.
Right, except it doesn't say anything about evidence on it. It says Stop and Shop, correct?
Correct.
What do you think's in that evidence bag? I'm sorry, Stop and Shop bag.
I'm not sure.
You were when these pictures were taken?
I could tell that it's the Canton Police Sally Port, so it's some point after the state police had seized the vehicle.
And at some point after you had brought the solo cups back to the station.
Correct.
Matter of fact, these were taken on February 1st. You recognize that?
It appears to be solo cups with substance inside.
Are those just any solo cups, or the solo cups that you took back to the station from 34 Fairview?
I mean, I couldn't say definitively, but it certainly looks like it.
It appears that they have red liquid material floating in the bottom.
Yes.
That appear to be blood.
The top three I can see. Yeah, the only two I see that don't have it are the bottom two left.
Okay. And do you see somebody with gloved hands opening that bag? Same bag, little white rag right there?
I do.
Okay. That appear to be the same 6 solo cups?
That you just showed me in the previous slide?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are those the same 6 solo cups that you gathered at the scene at 34 Fairview and ultimately brought back to Canton PD?
They certainly appear like they are, but I can't say definitively, but they...
And the reason you can't say definitively, Lieutenant, is because there is no label on this bag, is there?
Not on that side of it, no.
There is no property number on this bag, is there?
Not on the side that's visible to me, no.
There is no evidence tape on this bag, is there?
Not on the side that's visible to me, no.
Well, let's look at the other photographs. Are you, well, before we do that, are you suggesting that all of that material is on the other side of this bag?
I don't know. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you I don't know.
Okay. Looking at it from the top, does it appear anywhere from that vantage point that there's evidence tape that's ever been put on that bag, that has ever been secured?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that.
Well, one of the ways that you can tell that evidence tape has been put on an item is because when the evidence tape is placed on it, it's completely sealed. And if, in fact, that seal is ever broken, it's not torn off, it's cut, and there's initials put on, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Have you ever used evidence tape before? To seal anything?
I'm sure I have. I don't recall off the top of my head.
How long have you been a detective? I'm sorry, how long were you a detective when you were a detective?
I was a detective for 11 months as a sergeant, and then I was a detective for 15 months back in 2011-12.
And in your experience, and how long have you been a police officer?
Over 24 years.
So in your 24 years of experience and over a year as a detective, you can't remember if you've ever used evidence sealing tape?
As I said, I'm sure I have. I just can't recall one off the top of my head.
If you recall using it at all, isn't the protocol that when evidence sealing tape is used to seal an item of evidence, when it's removed, it's not torn off, it's cut, and then new sealing tape is put over it with an initial and a date, correct?
Objection.
Do you know the answer to that?
I don't.
Okay, next question.
Thank you.
All right, so defend this, Derek.
Not going to defend it, but we're going to have a little show and tell today on our YouTube version for anybody who's watching right now. I haven't been a police officer since 2017. I've been even longer since I was in detectives. I was in detectives for 4 years. And even now, in my podcast studio, as we speak, I have a couple items that I would like to show to you. First item being evidence tape.
Oh, look at that.
Evidence tape.
Do you know what evidence tape is,
Yeah.
Detective Levasseur?
Yeah, and so...
Have you ever used evidence tape?
So, but even more so, this is evidence tape, and it is exactly like the defense attorney described. This type of tape, once you put it on there, it doesn't come off. You have to cut through it to open it up, which is how you'll know it's no longer sealed. But I got more, just in case. And again, I'm not on the job anymore. We also have a different type of evidence tape if it's a smaller something, like a smaller item, like maybe this vial that I still carry that I would put blood in. And
Not a red Solo cup, you mean?
No. And
you
then,
mean a sealed, sterile?
Yep. I'd put this in a sealed container with
Wow.
evidence tape. And then also, if you're really good at your job, you keep a roll of the biohazard tape with you as well to wrap around it. And then we have what's called gloves. We have also, if you're unable to put something on this because it's a little difficult, we have evidence tags. Look at that. It says evidence right on it. So, we're prepared over here in Levasseur Studios. And
Wait, hold on. Do you have stakes?
I know what a stake is. That was the one good line he had.
STAKES.
Yeah, that was the one good line he had. No, I mean, listen, to not make light of the situation, we are taught in BCI school, which is criminal investigative school, where you're doing like crime scene, forensics, things like that when you're processing a scene. We are taught that in some scenarios, you have to improvise, right? Because time is of the essence. So like an example I always give is you always want to have a scale on you, basically a ruler. We just call it a scale. If you don't have a scale, because sometimes that can get misplaced, use your flashlight or you use something
So when you
of
mean
reference.
scale, you don't mean a weight scale. You mean this is how far this blood drop is from this blood drop. Yep. This is how far this blood drop is from the body.
It's a ruler. It's stupid, but sometimes the scales are like L-shaped. So you'll use that in your photograph, but sometimes you don't have one, so you'll use something that you can use later, like
a point of reference.
Like if I only had my cell phone, I would put my cell phone there to give you an idea of the size. That is a rare circumstance, but these items that I'm describing to you, when I was in detectives and we were on call, we always inside our vehicle, and I have the bag over there. That's where I pulled this out of, where we had these items at the ready. For any call. If we got called out to a scene, we had these items because they are critical in any investigation. And it's very apparent to me that this officer was not prepared for duty that day. I don't remember if I had evidence tape in my duty bag as a patrolman, but minimum, the detective that shows up, he should have all these items like I have here. So you have a couple issues. You have I also have an issue with the leaf blower too, to a certain degree, because when you're using a leaf blower, obviously you're not a professional leaf blower. So you potentially are blowing away evidence as well. Like he could have blew the shoe further down the road. We don't know. Leaf blowers are pretty strong.
They're pretty powerful.
Yeah. And so if he was out in the middle of the woods and he had trekked into the woods for like an hour and the bag's back at the car and he wasn't able to get it in there, I could see this justification, but you're right next to the car. The items should have been in the car for you to utilize. The fact that he's going across the street using solo cups that we don't know if they were used or not used. At minimum, you have cross-contamination, you have a chain of custody issue. And when we talk about creating doubt about it, when he couldn't remember whether or not he sealed the bag, or even more so, if he's used evidence tape in the past, it was not a good day for him.
Hold on a second. He kept saying, I put it in an evidence bag. You didn't put it in an evidence bag, dude. You put it in a freaking Stop and Shop bag.
No, I got to look. Well, maybe I'm confused because the paper bag.
It's a Stop and Shop bag. And that is this dude, Lank. He's like, but it looks exactly like evidence bags.
So even the paper bag? Because I thought the
paper bag wasn't an evidence bag. It was a grocery bag.
Okay, so the paper. Okay, so I missed that because I was thinking about it as two different things. I thought the paper bag, the Stop and Shop bag. Shout out Stop and Shop. Love Stop and Shop. This is not a paid advertisement, but we love Stop and Shop over here. Do you have Stop and Shop where you are?
Never heard of it.
Oh, love Stop and Shop. Shout out to Rhode Island, Mass people. No, love Stop and Shop. Staple. Anyways, I thought in the Sally Port. You know what the Sally Port is, right?
I would assume it's like the place where they tow cars. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, Sallyport. No, this is good because a lot of people wouldn't know. So basically, when you arrest someone, it's usually 1 or 2 garage bays. You pull in and it's a secured bay. The door will shut behind you. And then the other door, there's usually a little locker there where the officer will take off their gun, put it into the locker with a key. And then at that point, you can either get buzzed in or let in by someone. What it does is it creates like they call it a man trap, where if you're pulling a prisoner out of the Sallyport, they can't escape, right? They can't run out of the garage because it's already locked, but they also can't run into the police station because there's that secure door there. So it's basically the gray area before you go into the holding area or you go into the station. And a lot of times if you're going to process a car in inclement weather, you'll bring the car in there because it's a controlled area that's on camera, that's secured. So the entire vehicle is now part of evidence and can be monitored at all times. So we'll usually put a sign on the door outside the Sallyport for patrolmen saying, evidence in here, vehicle in here, do not enter. So those are all things you got to do. But yeah, I mean, it's just a cluster. I don't know what else to say.
All right,
like,
so
there's
red
no
Solo
justification.
cups, right?
Yeah.
Not covered, not sealed.
Yeah, it's a
Stop
problem.
and shop bag, not an
Yeah.
evidence bag. And you
Yeah.
can hear him. He's like, it's the same thing. And
No,
the
he looked
defense
like a moron.
Yeah, the defense attorney's like, it's not the same thing.
No, I was
it's
cringing.
a grocery bag.
I was cringing,
Not
which is why
only that,
I grabbed all these items.
these things, these samples, if you can even call them that at this point, were collected on January 29th. This picture was taken on February 1st by Karen Reed's car. Those red Solo cups with the blood samples are sitting next to the car in the garage in that bag still.
Yeah, it's a
They
problem.
do not have evidence tape on them.
Yeah.
They were not put into refrigerated storage, temporary storage, as he claims. I mean, if they were, why would they be taken out and then put next to the car? It's literally a paper bag with some cups in there that has now water from the snow melting and blood. And whatever happened with this stuff, right? This is ridiculous. That's 2 days later.
Yeah, no, it's bad. And I keep saying the spectrum, right? It could be just pure incompetence or it could be something more nefarious. And that's what we're trying to go through now, because I have to say, you can't keep just saying the excuse, oh, they just made a mistake, or this is just stupidity, or this is just incompetence. And this is why we have a justice system, and this is why we have court, because the defense attorney, their job is to say, and did you follow policy and procedure? If you didn't, we're going to hold you accountable, and you could be responsible for this case going in the trash can just because you're an idiot. So that's what their job is, and that's, you have a lot here that just brings into too many questions.
But it seems like it was handled so badly that it was like intentionally handled badly, right?
So yes, but also it's almost like the same thing I said about Karen earlier, where it's almost so obvious that it's too obvious. Does that make sense? Like, you would think there'd be a little bit more like,
if you believe she was making all these weird admissions. Yeah.
It's just like, it's so obvious that it would be a cover up. That is it a cover up? That's the question. There's so many red flags that, like, you would think that if this was a calculated cover up by investigators who do this type of work all the time, they would leave less of a paper trail. But there's just constant examples of just mistake after mistake after mistake.
Yes, it's horrendous. And I mean, once again,
evidence tape will be on sale on the Crime Weekly podcast website if you'd like it. I'm just kidding.
You know who should buy it? Lank. Sergeant Lank. He needs some. I don't know. He can't remember.
We don't often bring props on the show. This might be a first.
He can't remember if he's ever used it.
Is this a first for us? A prop?
No, of course not.
I don't know. I don't know if we brought out a prop before.
He doesn't know. Did I ever use evidence tape? I cannot recall.
This is by the way,
Ludicrous.
this is exactly what you would use. This is exactly what these tubes are for. You have bigger ones too, but you usually use some type of Q-tip or something to scrape it, and then obviously gloves on, and then you'd put it in here.
And then my favorite part, he's like, "There's no dirt and debris. It was just snow and blood." And he's like, "There's no dirt and debris in the snow."
No dirt and snow.
Dirt and debris in the snow. And he's like, "I didn't see any dirt and debris." Of course there's freaking dirt and debris in the snow, dude. Of course there is. But it's just like he
Well,
plays
is it possible
dumb.
there could be no dirt in the snow if it's like on the top level?
They used a leaf blower. You don't think shit was getting all mixed up in there in this hurricane of snow?
I mean, I've eaten snow before and didn't taste any dirt.
You didn't taste it, but it was there, my friend.
Probably.
It was there.
Probably.
Mm-hmm. You know what else was probably? I don't want to talk about it. Anyways, listen. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We have barely scratched the surface, if you can believe it. And I mean, we are 2.5 hours in right now. And it feels like this was a very jam-packed episode, and unbelievable how much is still left to cover. So we're going to wrap up now, but stay tuned. Stay tuned, folks.
Yeah, everyone, if you like what you're hearing, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments below. We know this is going to be a popular series. It's already the first episode's a popular series, so we're going to keep it impartial. I know Stephanie's on one end. I'm always going to try to stay in the middle.
So what he means is he's going to try to keep it impartial. That was, you're like, we're going to try to keep it impartial. He's like,
listen,
I know Stephanie's very biased, but I'm going to try.
I mean, everyone knows you by now.
It's hard to when you're literally faced with the facts of this case.
I think I'm doing a pretty good job of balancing it here. I'm literally bringing out props. I'm calling it how I see it. And I'm taking this case at face value, and I'm looking at the players in this case. I'm not extrapolating it out to the entire state of Massachusetts or law enforcement in general. I'm talking about these officers. I think I've made it pretty clear that I don't agree with how they've handled this so far. And I can understand why people are very upset about this case and why so many people support Karen, because there's a lot of problems with this case, just from a procedural standpoint, and we haven't even gotten too deep into it yet. So, before we keep going, I'm looking forward to hearing more. I know you guys will be weighing down in the comments below and letting us know what you think, and we'll go from there. We'll take it to the next episode. So, without anything else, before we continue on for another 45 minutes, everyone stay safe out there, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Bye.